Make sure you like and subscribe for more content. With that done, let's begin. Coruscant, present day, Anakin Pov. Anakin. Obi-Wan Kenobi's voice was raised above the hum of the lightsabers. His former apprentice, Anakin Skywalker, deactivated his lightsaber. Yes, Master? He asked. The Council has a new mission for you. Anakin took off at a jog. Picked up strange readings we have. From the Quadrant 180 they are. Yoda told me. We want you to investigate and find out if the Separatists are operating in the area. Mace Windu added. He nodded his acceptance, and Yoda spoke again. The lone you will, stretch too thin the GDR. Anakin nodded again, and left. As the hyperspace engine hummed, he read the datapad. Quadrant 180 was a remote sector, not even charted. No known intelligent life was reported, although Gizka overpopulated the place. This was all that was known. He put down the datapad and sighed. Great. Ought to be fun. Anakin thought sarcastically. He began to pull the fighter into a descent when a glint of metal caught his eye. What the? Anakin yelped. A giant space station hovered over the planet. But the odd thing was that fleets of starships were there too. They were frozen, hanging in place against a backdrop of stars. Blinking to clear his vision, he looked up again. Still there. So he began a descent to dock on the station. Starforge, 4,000 years ago, Revan Pov. Revan left Bastila and Canderous behind, and proceeded through the door. Anger, hate, fury, all swarmed through her. She wanted blood. She wanted to feel the cold hilt of her lightsaber in her hands, hear the hum as she swung it. Revan wanted to hear the hiss as she struck flesh, hear the blood bubble. Her face twisted into a snarl. Malak would pay for what he had done. His blood was hers. She stalked through the droid bay after angrily destroying the droids. The Starforge trembled. What the? Now? Revan stepped again and ran into a hard body. Her lightsaber jumped to her hands, and the double-bladed black glow gleamed in the semi-darkness. Now, Anakin. Anakin turned a corner, and stopped. The most beautiful woman he had ever seen was frozen in place. Ebony black hair was braided down her back, except for a strand that hung across her left eye. Her eyes held a fury, deep-seated in the cold glare. Her eyes were as black as the depths of space. His eyes traveled down her body. Trim, muscular, fit. Well-graced in the chest. Hey, I'm Anakin, what can I say? Lightsaber. She held a lightsaber in her right hand, with a longer hilt than any I had ever seen before. For a better grip. Was she a GD? Then, everything came to life. Anakin felt a new presence awaken, one far stronger in the Force than any he had ever felt before. It overwhelmed him, swamping his senses. His sight grew dim as the woman, suddenly, inexplicably alive, swung around, a black blade springing out of each end of the hilt she held. "Who the Force are you?" she demanded. Her voice rang with power and fury, somehow desperate and controlled at the same time. "Who the Force are you?" Anakin asked, attempting to get his composure back. She was gorgeous, with long, silky hair, eyes that glowed black topaz, a pale complexion, and a certain, almost leonine, grace. "There is no emotion, there is." "Hush. How does it go?" She smirked. "I am Raven's star. Didn't Master Vander tell you about us?" Seeing the confused look on the young, handsome face, she explained, Bastila, Raven, the Evenhawk. Ringing any bells, GD Gore. She took the moment of silent confusion to examine the youth before her. He was undeniably handsome, possibly the most handsome male she had ever met. He had strong features and dark wavy brown hair that curled slightly around the ends. The only mar on the otherwise perfect face was a thin scar across his right eye. "Wait, Master Vander." "That's right." He held his hand at roughly waist height. "About so tall, yellowish-green, huge ears. Obviously you know him." "You're kidding." "I am not. I don't know what kind of spice you're on, but Master Vander has been missing for almost 4,000 years. For 4,000? Revan couldn't believe it. But time travel was impossible, even for her. The truth hit her like a charging cat hound. Time travel was impossible, but temporal stasis through the Force was not. But to hold up for 4,000 years, it would have had to be cast by someone even more powerful than her. Or something. Revan glanced at the Starforge, realization shooting through her. The Starforge, a massive artifact of dark side power, had put her, and everyone on board, into stasis, waiting for this moment. But why? She asked, not really expecting a response. "Look at him. He is the Chosen One." The voice of the Starforge echoed in her head. The Chosen One. It was incredible, one born of a human and the Force itself. He must truly be powerful. Imagine the damage she could do with that kind of power harnessed at her side. She wanted off. Forge enhanced visions of what looked like, quite literally, fire and brimstone dancing in her head. "Hello? Force Raven." She realized that a large tan hand was waving in front of her face. She did what was natural to her. Zapped it with a mild jolt of Force lightning. Ow. Holy Force, what was that? Belatedly, Revan realized that if he was a GD, he would have recognized Force lightning, and pinned her as a Sith. "Nothing, just some static electricity," she explained quickly, trying to cover it up. "Very." Anakin was skeptical. Revan's eyes shot open, memory jarring her out of her musings. "Malak," she hissed, hate lacing her voice. Without warning, she had deactivated her lightsaber, reattached it to her belt, and sprung into a full-on sprint towards the elevator in the space of about 2.5 seconds. After a moment's worth of startled processing, Anakin was off after her. He observed again the graceful cat-like movements of her muscles, so absorbed that he almost ran right into her when she stopped moving. She spun, demanding, "Where, exactly, do you think you're going? Who is this Melak character, anyway? Who is Melak? Has he really been forgotten already?" She shook her head, her braid whipping from side to side. Man, Jolie was right. Who would have thought it? Huh? Though I find your seeming lack of vocabulary endearing, I really have to kill him now. Wait. The Starforge commanded. Use this situation. See how he fights. She could see the logic in the statement, so she offered, but if I'm going to be effective in this new time, I should see how the GD fight. Do you want to help? Who is he? An evil tyrant bent on destroying the galaxy at all costs. And the Sith. A strange feral glow lit up in Anakin's eyes. I'm in. She smirked, the evil expression flitting over her face, and gone before Anakin could see it. Good. Revan charged into the command center. Lightsaber held loosely at her side, she stalked up to Melak. Melak. She inclined her head. He spun to face her, lightsaber blazing. She was gone. He looked around, but then Revan crashed home. Her lightsaber whistled down. He got it up. Just in time. Revan spun away. Her blade was a blur, striking and retracting so fast it was impossible to see. Anakin was staring, mouth agape. She was beautiful. So fast, and deadly. He would have been dead within seconds were he Melak. Revan purposely allowed herself to slow, faking weariness. Her tactical brain kicked in, and she jumped up to the ledge. Anakin's breath caught. If she was tired, she would be cut down. Then he breathed again at the small smile. She was faking. Tired Melak. She taunted. He shook his head, and launched a new attack. As he spun wide behind her to gain his breath, Revan saw an opening. Swinging with all her might, she sliced his torso from his legs. At the same moment, she released a storm of force to drain his health to her. Anakin stared at the purple light. He'd never seen that power before. As Revan slid to the floor, he raced to catch her. Thanks, she murmured. We need to get to the hangar bay. My ship and friends are there, she added. He was staring at her with a strange expression on his face. Who are you? Where did you learn to fight like that? He exclaimed. She merely smiled before her eyes rolled up in her head, and she fainted. Later, Anakin opened the door with his back, and was greeted by a furious woman. What did you do to her? Who are you? The woman exclaimed. Revan stirred. Bastila, chill. This is actually, I don't know who this is. I do know he's a GD. Sir, if I may have a moment with Bastila and Canderous. Belatedly, Anakin noticed the hulking man behind Bastila. But that's a Mandalorian. He protested. She gave him a look, and stood up. Anakin sighed, and left. Revan turned to Bastila. Bastila. If my suspicions are correct, we have been in stasis for 4,000 years. I have a plan. Do you remember the chosen one I prophesied about? Bastila nodded. Well, this GD is him. I'm going to use him. Bastila grudgingly agreed. Anakin re-entered the room. He followed Revan and Bastila into the hangar. That's your ship, he exclaimed after he saw the engines. Revan nodded. Those engines are pseudo-fast. These are better than anything you can get. Where did you get them? They were regular engines. I upgraded them. Mostly they're my own invention. Revan answered. Shaking his head, Anakin boarded the Ebon Hulk for the first time. Revan shook her head. For the past 15 minutes, Anakin had been running around like a child. No, worse. A 3-year-old on Kaffa. She could have sworn that she had actually seen him petting the control board once. She sighed. She was going to hate herself for this, but it was the fastest way to earn his trust. Actually, Bastila was going to hate her for this too. Anakin, do you want to fly us back to Coruscant? His eyes lit up like a aforementioned 3-year-old on Midwinter. Force, yeah. Ahem. I mean, yes, Master Raven, I would. Revan laughed outright at that. Don't worry, Anakin. I'm not a stodgy old master with my lightsaber so far up my butt I can't see it anymore. Anakin froze. How often he'd had that exact same thought. Even about Master Obi-Wan, once or twice. I. She laughed again. So that much hasn't changed in 4,000 years, then. Come on, admit it. They're stuck-up pricks, the lot of them. I will not. Anakin said, in his best imitation of his master. Seeing the skeptical look on Raven's face, he added, I will not say that they are stuck-up pricks with lightsaber hilts up their butts, even if it is true. Revan grinned broadly. Oh, I like this one. Hey, I've got someone I want you to meet. She led him to what looked like a garage of some sort. His eyes lit on the swoop bike, and he was on his knees examining it before she could blink. Well, I like that you show so much enthusiasm. That's not who I want you to meet. HK. Anakin turned. Behind him was an old beaten-up rust-colored droid. Its eyes came to life, glowing yellow. Statement. Affirmative, Master. Query. What meatbag may I kill for you? Joyful statement. Is it that one? Anakin blinked. Did that thing just ask to kill me? Yeah, and he called you a meatbag, too. Should I be offended? No? I like HK. He has personality. Still, he's sort of a weird droid for a GD, isn't he? Hurt statement. Master, this meatbag has caused my feelings to suffer damage. May I terminate him? No, HK, there will be no terminating of meatbags unless I tell you to. Query. Then may I terminate that inferior droid specimen you keep around? No, T3 is useful. Something you might want to be a little more often, HK. I'm sorry, your droid's fascination with killing things is frankly creepy. Anakin cut in, feeling he would have to keep these two in hand. They bickered like sister and brother, for force's sake. Anakin, I have to tell you something. I'm not being entirely truthful with you. Well, what do you mean? I told you that my name is Raven Star, but that hasn't always been my name. In fact, I've only been Raven for about 2 months. Well, okay, 4,000 years and 2 months, but you get the idea. But you're 23. 23. You seem so much older. Is it an insult or a compliment? I'm not sure. Sorry, we're getting off topic. Listen, I need you to promise me something. Promise me you won't get all wigged out and attack me or something. Yeah, sure. What is it? We should have a little more privacy. Come on. She led Anakin to a cabin, where they were alone. Take a seat. Anakin sat, uneasily. As of, well, 4,000 years and 3 months ago, I was not Raven Star. I was Darth Revan, the Dark Lord of the Sith. What? Anakin, look at me. Anakin, calm down. Let me explain. No, dang it. I trusted you, and you turn out to be a Sith. Not anymore. Anakin paused. What do you mean? About 2.5 months ago, my flagship was boarded by a raiding party with a young GD named Bastila in the lead. Bastila. Like, he gestured. Yeah. So, I was about to kill them, me being all Scythe and all, when my apprentice, Darth Malak. Isn't he the guy we just fought? Yeah. Stop interrupting. Malak fired on me. My body was dying and my mind was already dead, but Bastila was able to keep me alive. She brought me to the GD Council on Dantooine, and they put fake memories in my head. Memories of being Raven Star. Anyway, Bastila went and got herself captured and I rescued her. Long story short, I ended up being trained as a GD, and sent on a quest to find the Star Forge, and kill Malak. Along the way, I discovered who I really was. Revan. Yes. The Dark Lord. What did you do? I decided it didn't matter. I was Raven Star, at GD Night. And I had to fulfill my mission. So I did. Only, some sort of stasis got put on this Star Forge, and you were there. So. Now you can either decide that I'm still Revan, Dark Lord, or that I'm Raven, GD. It's up to you. I guess that since you told me about Revan, when you could have easily lied to me, I guess that I can trust you. He looked her in her strange topaz eyes. Raven. Good. Revan hugged him. Anakin gave her a very strange look. What, can't I hug you? She replied, feigning hurt. He grinned ruefully, and hugged her back. As Anakin went back to examining her bike, Revan entered the cockpit. So? Bastila prodded. Revan grinned evilly. Hook, line and sinker. She sneered. Later, Anakin wandered around the ship before accidentally entering Revan Bastila's door. Revan was sound asleep in the lower bunk. Seating himself, he watched the gentle rise and fall of her chest. Force, she was beautiful. Her hair fell across her face, and she twitched in her sleep. Suddenly, she began to toss and turn. She began to scream. Revan dreamed. Revan watched as Karth was being pulled away from her. Knew she strained, but couldn't get free. Then, she was free, and running full pelt. Drawing on the dark side, she shot down the shadowy figures. She hauled Karth to his feet. He shoved her away. Get away from me. Monster. Monster, he pulled his blaster. Then was gone, sliced down by a blue blade. If you heard one hair on her head, Anakin was threatening. Revan sank back into the comfort of Anakin's arms. I don't care if you are Darth Revan. And Anakin cradled her in his arms. SHH, he crooned. She quieted. He gently lifted her up, and then unable to help himself, placed a small kiss on her lips. Quickly drawing away, he carefully laid her down on her bunk. Across the ship, Bastila smiled. Perfect. Anakin. Yeah, Bastila. What I mean to say is, what? Do you think you could slow down? Anakin blinked. What do you mean? I have never in my entire life met someone as reckless, irresponsible, and addicted to danger as you. Anakin felt a tap on his shoulder, and turned around to see Revan standing there, 2 earplugs on her outstretched hand. He grinned, and put them in. Almost instantly, Bastila shouting dulled to a minor annoyance. He smirked at Revan, mouthing hold on to something. Revan took one look at the glimmer in his eyes and grinned. As soon as she was safely strapped into the copilot's chair, Anakin sent the hawk through a dizzying series of loops, twirls, and corkscrews that left Bastila retching on the floor. Oz, do try not to get puke all over my ship, there's a good GD. Oh, go to heck, Revan, and take your new friend with you. It probably would have been more impressive if she had managed to storm out without stepping in what was 2 hours ago her breakfast. But then again, even Bastila Shan isn't perfect. With a single glance at each other, both Revan and Anakin doubled over, laughing. Anakin took the earplugs out of his ears and set the HawkSnav computer to autopilot. I have got to say, this is one of the most fun missions I've ever been on. Yeah. Hey Anakin. Yeah? Do you think I'll ever see you again? Once we get to Coruscant, I mean. I don't know. He frowned. His feelings about Revan were so different from any he had ever had before. He didn't know what to call it. No, he did. He, Anakin Skywalker, was in love with the Dark Lord of the Sith. I do know I'd like to see you again. I'd like to see you again, too. Suddenly, she leaned over and punched him lightly on the arm. Maybe I could teach you something about how we Dark Lords do it. Anakin grinned. I could probably teach you a thing or two, you old geezer. Old geezer. I'm hurt, Ani, really I am. Anakin's heart skipped an unhealthy number of beats at the use of his nickname. How old are you, anyway? 23. You're the same age as me. Yeah. Both of them were jolted by the sudden drop out of hyperspace. Stretched out before them was the shining, sparkling city planet called Coruscant. Welcome home. Anakin whispered. Revan's mouth dropped open. Wow, she breathed. She shook her head. It's so big. I trained on Dantooine, so I'm just a poor, backwards country GD. She joked. Anakin slung an affectionate arm around her shoulder. Wait till you see the temple. I'll have to introduce you to the council, of course. Yoda will be amazed. Mace will probably burst in ardor. Anakin laughed. Revan snuggled into the warm body. The Ebon Hawk gracefully landed on the GD temple landing pad. A squad of clones was there to meet them. Halt. Who are you? This ship does not have access to the pad. The commander ordered. Well, I say it does. Anakin commanded. General Skywalker. Oh, of course. The clones saluted. General Skywalker, eh? Revan teased. Bastila, still faintly green, Canderous, T3, and HK-47, followed them as they disembarked. Anakin led them through the halls, passing many curious GD and Padawans. Why are they staring? Revan asked nervously, double and triple checking hers and Bastila's fake auras. Still I. Good. 1, because I have my arm around you. 2, you have a double-bladed lightsaber, and no one has used one in at least 1,000 years. 3, no one has never seen you or Bastila before. Or a Mandalorian either for that matter. And 4, okay, there was a 4, but I forgot what it was. Revan giggled. Bastila shook her head, the image of an exasperated GD. Anakin. Obi-Wan's voice rang out behind them. I was hello, who's this? Obi-Wan noticed Revan. This is Revan. Anakin answered. It's a long story. Anyway, I have to go to the council chambers. Obi-Wan followed, curious as to who this Revan was. Anakin. Return you have. Who brought have you? Yoda asked as they entered. This is Revan. Obi-Wan gasped. Not Revan as in Revan in Malak. The historian asked, pale. I'll explain. Revan stepped forward. She proceeded to detail all, well most, of the journey of the Star Forge. She skipped over killing Kart, Juhani, Jolie, and Mission, as well as her return to the dark side and Bastila's foe. They sat in silence. Sense the dark side on them, I do not. Yoda finally spoke. Mace nodded agreement. In that case, we welcome you to the GD, again, Master Star, Knight Shan. You will have a seat on this council, Revan, as your insight is renowned, even 4,000 years later. Mace added. You will stay in the suite next to Obi-Wan and Anakin. Your companion, Canderous. Revan nodded. Mace went on. Will most assuredly be welcome in the fleet. Mandalorians are well known for their battle skills. Canderous smirked. As they left to show Revan her new rooms, she practically glowing. I'm so excited. Hey, are the Sith still around? She asked. Unfortunately. We killed the old apprentice, but the master, Sidious, has taken a new one, Count Dooku. They are the leaders of the Separatists. Anakin answered. These are your rooms. He pointed first to the one next to his. Revan then the one next to that. Bastila. Obi-Wan left Anakin happily chatting with Revan. Revan. The most evil Sith Lord to ever live. Something was off, and not just the goofy look on his former apprentice's face when he looked at Revan. And he meant to find out. No, not information on Revan, information on Revan. Beep boop beep beep boop. Yes, that's right. Darth Revan. Beep beep boop boop beep. Disappeared. What do you mean, disappeared? You know, when you're curious about someone, it's considered polite to ask them, instead of going behind their back. Obi-Wan spun around, away from the terminal in the GD library he was using. Leaning casually against the doorframe stood Revan, lightsaber held loosely in hand. Alright, then. What do you want with Anakin? I want to turn him to the dark side. I want him to rule the galaxy, no, the universe, with me. That enough information for you, Master Kenobi? Her voice turned the title into an insult. And what makes you think I'll allow you to get away with this? Oh, you won't remember this little conversation. In fact, all you will remember is that you trust me. You would trust me with your life. You would trust me with Anakin's life. I would never do that, Sith. Maybe a little persuasion would do the trick. Suddenly there was a pressure deep within his head. It pounded, and he was filled with an abrupt, overwhelming fear. There was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, he was terrified. With Obi-Wan's shields down due to the insanity she had cast on him, it was easy to reach into his mind and plant complete trust and faith with force persuade. She smirked. Manipulation had always been her strong point. She let the insanity wear off and rushed to Obi-Wan's side. Master Kenobi, are you alright? Obi-Wan looked dazed and shook his head. Yes, Master Star, I am fine. Thank you for your concern, it is just in my brain. Can I get you something? No, dear girl, I will be fine. If you're sure, then I should probably get back to Bastille. Yes, of course. Don't let me keep you. As she walked away, he thought, what a nice girl. Anakin is lucky to have such a true and loyal friend. Hook, line, and sinker. Revan entered the rooms that she now called home. AHHH. Anakin jumped out at her and spun her round. Hey beautiful. Revan's eyes suddenly dimmed, and she slumped. What did I say? Anakin asked, afraid. Just, you remind me of an old friend. She twisted her mouth into a semblance of a grin. It's nothing. Anakin guided her to her couch and pulled her close. Sister, you're not getting away that easily. Something about this friend is bothering you. We're going to talk about it. Revan snapped. I said it was nothing. Just leave it. She yelled. Anakin got up, miffed. Fine. He exited the room. Revan sank back on the chair and pulled her knees to her chest. Why did he have to remind her of Karth? That wound was healing, but still hurt. Healing. Did that mean yeah, it did. Revan was falling in love. Anakin angrily stormed into his and Obi-Wan's apartment. Stupid Revan. All he wanted to do was comfort her after he made her sad. Then she goes and blows up at him. Ani? Revan's voice echoed softly. He didn't look at her, but stared angrily at the wall. Would it help if I apologized? It was impossible to stay angry with her. I guess it would. Calm her. He opened his arms, and she sat beside him, leaning gently against him. When you called me beautiful, it reminded me of Karth. Karth and Asi. He rescued me from the Ender Spire, and we escaped terrorists. Well, you know the story, but along the way, I kinda fell in love with him. Revan began. On Tatooine, he told me he loved me, and I foolishly believed him. Once we found out I was Revan, he tried to kill me. I had to leave him behind on the unknown planet. It was the hardest thing I ever had to do, because I still loved him. Anakin drew back. That was then. Now I found someone who I think accepts me, and I think I'm falling for. She tilted her face up. Anakin stared into her strange eyes, and saw the vulnerability there. I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have tried to pressure you to talk. He began to lean down to her. I shouldn't be doing this, it's not the GD way. Revan protested. You're not. I am. He said. Right before he kissed her. The instant he kissed her, a strange new sensation flooded throughout both of them. Revan fell into it, reveling in it, drinking it in. Her hands came up in a lightning-fast movement, twining into Anakin's hair and pushing him against her lips with more intensity. Anakin experienced it differently. It was heady, almost intoxicating, and he had a sudden, strange desire to press himself against her, to feel her warmth. They fell apart only when they were gasping for breath. Anakin felt weak, as though he had touched a power greater than any he had ever imagined. Dang, why does the council ban this? I thought we already agreed on that. They're old coots with sabers up their butts. Listen, Revan. If we're going to take this, whatever this is, to the next level, I need to be completely honest with you. Revan leaned forward, interested. She had sensed a slight corruption within his soul, the kind that came from doing something dark, and wanted to know more. About 6 months ago, I returned to my home, Tatooine. I found out my mother had been sold to someone who had freed her and made her his wife. Sand people came, and they took her. They took her to their camp where they beat her, and, for all I know, raped her. When I found out, I went to look for her. I found her. She died in my arms. She died right here, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Ani Revan tried, in an attempt to calm him down. No. I need to do this. I lost control when she died. I attacked the Sand people. Ani, anyone would have done that. Not just their men. Their women and their children, too. I even slaughtered their livestock. He laughed bitterly. But the worst part is that it felt good. It felt, right? How did you know? Former Dark Lord, here. Oh? Right. Anakin, I understand. See, I don't really believe in all that propaganda the council spews out at us. What do you mean? Well, they always tell us to be detached from our emotions, never to feel anything, right? Yeah. But just now, when you kissed me, I'd be lying if I said it felt bad. Anakin smirked. I just feel like all this dark side stuff is because they've never felt anything. I mean, could you ever see Master Yoda in love? They both shuddered at the idea of love poetry in Yoda's broken speech. I think they fear it because it gives us power. When you were avenging your mother, were you strong enough to take on the entire camp? If our emotions can give us that much power that we can use for the good of the Republic, do we have the right, no, the responsibility to use that power? I mean, I wouldn't want to fall, but if we temper power from emotions with morality, wouldn't that be amazing? The more Anakin thought about what she had said, the more it made sense. Yeah, you're right. Emotions don't have to be evil, but they can give you so much power. Sensing a near victory, Revan continued, if we weren't held back by the code, I bet we could use the powers of our emotions to find ways to end this war, or to heal the sick. So if you ever came across someone in the same state as your mother, I could heal them. Anakin's eyes lit up. Well, I've broken the code before, what's one more time? He smiled. Revan grinned back. So we'll learn to use the power of our emotions together, then partner. Anakin bowed. Yes, my dear Revan, we shall. Later, after eating dinner and discussing more at length of their plan, Revan and Anakin ended up in the training room. Alone. In the middle of the night. I'll go first. Anakin called back the bottled-up rage he had built up over the years. He snapped his blue saber on with a roar. Unprepared, Revan was caught by the blade across her arm and leg. The saber cut a deep gash on both, and was fused by the heat. She fell to the floor in pain. Anakin's anger rushed away. Revan. He kneeled next to her. I'm so sorry. He whispered. Kiss it and make it better. She coughed. He grinned and shook his head. Leaning down, he caught her lips with his. Their tongues twined together, battling for dominance. Anakin's arms snaked up around her neck, and began to loosen the ties of her robe. She reached for his belt, and he let out a small moan. Revan froze. Anakin. He looked up with lust and love-filled eyes. We can't do this. Not here. We're in the training room for Sid's sakes. His snort was the unsupportive retort, but seeing the logic, he lifted her up. She let out a moan, this one of pain. Oh my god, I can't believe I forgot that. Here, I'll take you to Master Obi-Wan. He'll fix you up right. Obi-Wan shook his head, pretending to be exasperated. Oh Revan. Can't go a day without getting hurt in. He pointed to all the scars that marked her lithe body. She shrugged. A day in the life of a former Dark Lord. She lied about the former part. Anakin hugged her as she got up from the couch. Obi-Wan quietly left the room. I love you. Anakin whispered softly in her ear. Revan reveled in the words. I love you too. She nuzzled his ear. Come to bed. He looked at her sharply. Not what I meant. Just, bed. He nodded. They entered Revan's bedroom and she turned to her dresser. Pulling off her shirt, she was aware of Anakin's eyes on her. She raised an eyebrow, holding back laughter. She shook her head, and continued to undress. She then pulled on a sleeveless nightshirt. Anakin's eye wandered over the plains of Revan's golden body. Force, she was gorgeous. Tawny skin, naturally tanned, exquisite breasts, rather large, very nice. She was every man's fantasy. He drank in her image. As she pulled on the nightshirt, he noticed strange scars across her shoulders. What are those? He pointed. Oh, those are scars. I was born a Mandalorian, but was taken by the Jedi at a young age. I burned the clan markings and such off with my lightsaber. She lay down in bed, and Anakin laid beside her. She snuggled in closer, and fell asleep. Hyper-aware of the body pressed against his, Anakin sighed. It was going to be a long night. Well, Anakin thought ruefully, I was right. It was a long night. He could honestly say that he hadn't even got no wink of sleep. He was distracted from his thoughts by the yawn coming from the body next to him, as Revan stretched and sat up. Morning. Sleep well? She asked, eyes bright. Yeah. Anakin lied. Liar. She chuckled. Anakin. Obi-Wan burst through the door, yelling for his former Padawan. He stopped dead as he saw the male and the female facing away from each other, Revan just finishing pulling a set of robes over her head, and Anakin pulling on a pair of pants. Both were most distinctly blushing their brains out. Anakin, what did you do? Actually, Master Kenobi, it was my fault. Revan stated calmly. Her mind was whirling at 100 miles an hour, trying to come up with a plausible excuse. A sharp twinge in her leg granted her clarity of thought. Last night, because of my injury, I collapsed on Anakin's bed as soon as we arrived. I must have fallen asleep, right Anakin? Anakin looked mildly confused, then nodded. I'll bet Anakin didn't want to disturb me, so he probably made me comfortable and went to sleep on the floor. Obi-Wan was skeptical, but he could find no flaw in the excuse. Alright, then, Master Star, I have no choice but to accept your explanation. Anyway, Anakin, the Council has a mission for us. It seems that the Chancellor has been taken prisoner, and is being held on Dooku's flagship as we speak. What? Anakin exclaimed as worry for his friend swept over him. Obi-Wan and Revan both watched him, the former with worry and the latter with curiosity. We have to rescue him. Yes, Anakin, but be sure not to let your feelings for him cloud your judgment. Anakin bowed sheepishly. Yes, Master. Master Star, the Council would like you to join us in this mission as a field test of your powers, if you don't mind. Of course not, Master Kenobi. I would be honored to join you. Revan smoothly assured him. Excellent. Anakin, as soon as you are dressed, meet Master Star and I in the docking bay. We leave immediately. Yes, Master. Master Kenobi, if you don't mind, I would like a moment alone with Knight Skywalker. Alright, I don't see a problem with that. Obi-Wan turned smoothly and left. Revan looked at Anakin. So, he was this Chancellor. Chancellor Palpatine. He's a great man. When I told him about the Sand Raiders, he totally understood. They chum in. Anakin, I am going to need you to be extremely careful around this Chancellor. What? Why? I didn't want to alarm the council, but being a former Sith Lord, I am somewhat more in tune with their presences than most GD. Up until late last night, the Sith Lord you have been looking for had been somewhere on this planet. Now he's not. I feel as though the Sith Lord's departure from Coruscant and Chancellor Palpatine's might be connected. Why didn't you tell the council you could sense the Sith? Anakin questioned angrily. Anakin, think for Force's sake. Sith are trained to tap into the power of their emotions. You felt the power that comes from just scratching the surface of what you feel. Imagine someone who could harness that power 100-fold at their slightest whim. Do you really think that the council, or even the whole order, would stand the slightest chance against him? Anakin thought it over. Fine, I see your point. But I still think that Chancellor Palpatine has nothing to do with this. Fine. You have got to be the most stubborn, insufferable male I've ever met. Anakin smirked. I love you too. Ugh. Let's just go, shall we? Sure. The docking bay, Master Kenobi said. Yeah. Anakin grinned, lighting up the room and sending Revan's heart doing backflips all the way up to her mouth. Racier. Revan smirked evilly. Oh, you're on, GD boy. Revan easily outpaced Anakin. As he arrived a few minutes later, breathless, she was pulling on her leather gloves. No fair. You have longer legs. He complained. She arched an eyebrow. He stalked up to her, pretending to be angry. Then his face softened. Did I ever tell you what a pleasure it is not to have to bend over to kiss you? Once or twice, yeah. She spoke as he leaned in to kiss her. Anakin. Obi-Wan's enraged voice broke into their kiss. Revan waved a hand, bored. Obi-Wan shook his head, and his usual peaceful expression settled back in. Come. We must be off. Anakin blasted off before either, and quickly began to show off. Revan laughed into her arm. His red fighter edged closer to her black one, and she blew him a kiss. He made a big show of catching it. Just then, several missiles were launched. Anakin. Revan screamed as he took off into a spiral. He managed to escape his missile, but Obi-Wan wasn't so lucky. Anakin swooped behind, and attempted to shoot the droids off. Thus failing, he dragged his wing on Obi-Wan's. They barely made it into the hangar. As the GD leapt out, Revan raised a hand. The droids combusted. Giving her a surprised look, the three set off. Easily battling through all droids, the GD were amazed at Revan's skill with her saber. Wow. Anakin whispered. Wow. Obi-Wan agreed. The object of their fascination gave them an odd look. They followed her into the room. Dooku. Anakin shouted as the Sith leapt down. A fierce battle ensued. Obi-Wan was knocked to the floor unconscious, as Anakin gained the upper hand. Revan knew if he killed Dooku, Anakin would take another step onto his path. Her path. Silencing the Chancellor with a look, she strode forward. Anakin's hand trembled as he held the lightsabers to Dooku's neck. Kill him. She hissed. Anakin shook his head. It's not the GD way. He protested, rather weakly. A small nudge from Revan's mind, and his head tumbled to the floor. Anakin gave an exclaimed cry. He turned to free the Chancellor, and ran into Revan. It's alright. He deserved to die. She comforted. Anakin threw his arms around her. She always seemed to know just what to say. Their lips met. Him. Was heard from behind. Sorry. Revan hid a laugh. Laser shields. We're smarter than this. Apparently not. Anakin remarked sarcastically. I'd recommend the laser shields shut off. That's better. Everyone looked at Revan. She blinked and shrugged innocently. Laser shields annoy me. But how? Anakin asked. Force, I'm even more in love with her now. She shrugged again. I was a hacker before I was a GD. I just did some of my hacking moves, only with the fork crap, there's a bunch of droids around the corner. The next second, a small squadron of heavy battle droids rolled around the corner. With a familiar snap hiss, 3 lightsabers shot out. Anakin and Obi-Wan instantly flew into action, their teamwork perfected by years of practice. This gave Revan the chance she had been waiting for, as she stepped back in the guise of defending the Chancellor. Sidious. Revan. He acknowledged, one Dark Lord recognizing another. Listen. I know what you are trying to do. She explained in a furious whisper, channeling insanity into her voice. I've felt the dark side taint on him. But I want you to know, Anakin will swear loyalty to me. I am the Dark Lord who was baptized in the death fires of Malachor V. I am the Lord of the Sith, who led the Republic to victory over the Mandalorians. I am the only being in this universe capable of using the Star Forge, and I will be dang it if I let you take my apprentice away. By the end of her speech, Chancellor Palpatine had been reduced to a sniveling wreck. Good, Revan thought, just the way I like my pretentious Sith Lords. Anakin and Obi-Wan had made short work of the droids, and were rejoining the two. What happened to him? Anakin asked, gesturing to the sniveling Palpatine. Lester Bolt got to close. You know how these politicians are. Revan explained. We'd better get going if we're going to get back to Coruscant, right? The Ford took off again and promptly ran onto the bridge. Anakin. I thought you said this was the hangar bay. Revan exclaimed. Anakin surveyed the small army of droids in front of him, igniting his saber. Huh. The map must have been upside down. He said with a grin, and winked at Revan as he sprung into action. Revan spun into action, her lightsaber blur. Anakin leapt in to help. Obi-Wan took care of the bodyguards, and Revan and Anakin advanced on Grievous. He snatched up an electro-staff. Slamming it into the window, he was swept outside. Revan flailed around before using the Force to snag on a control board. Hulling herself up, she slammed the door. Metal plates quickly covered the window. Raising herself up, she looked over at Obi-Wan. He was battling a droid missing its head. He sliced upwards, and the droid's torso split from its legs. Thus taken care of, the cherry-red pieces of the droids fell to the floor. The black beams vanished into Revan's hilt, and Anakin slid into the pilot's chair. Obi-Wan sank into the copilot's chair. Revan laid a hand on Anakin's shoulder. "I believe in you, Ani," she whispered. The ship rocked. She leaned over. "And if you make it down safely," she didn't finish the sentence, but rather sent mental images. Anakin gasped. "The council room," he whispered furiously. She giggled and staggered as the ship lurched. Eventually, they managed to safely bring in the ship. Palpatine was still a quivering mess. He was led away as Anakin and Revan walked down the hall. "Ani," a voice echoed out from behind a pillar. Giving Revan an apologetic look, he slipped behind. "Who's that?" Padme tapped her foot. "That is none other than Darth Revan, Senator." Anakin replied diplomatically. "She's Darth," as in she broke off. "Yes. A Sith. And we are through." He spun away. Revan stared at the woman, memorizing her features. She linked arms with Anakin, and they entered the temple. They entered the suite belonging to Revan. Throwing down their heavy outer cloaks, Revan flopped on the bed. Anakin pinned her down. His mouth captured hers. She returned the kiss for a moment, then gently shoved him up. "Later, Ani," she promised. "Now, let's spar." "P.I." Anakin shouted as he rushed her. His lightsaber swung wildly, a beam of white hot light. With the distinctive snap hiss of lightsaber ignition, an onyx beam shot out to meet his blade. "Sloppy sloppy, Ani," Revan remarked with a slight smirk. She pushed on his saber, throwing him backwards, and spun around, her double-bladed saber creating a dark shadow through the air. She threw the lightsaber at him, guiding it with the Force. Anakin only spotted it in time to barely jump over it. "Whoa. You have to show me how you did that. That's not all I can do," Revan suddenly decided. She would show him some of her true power, to make him hunger for what she could do with the Force and what she could do to him. She brought the saber back to her hand, and pushed him backwards. That gave her enough time to prepare her next onslaught. She waited until he charged, and Force jumped over his head. She came down on his far side, and planted a kiss on the back of his neck. He jumped as the Force lightning she had channeled into her lips flowed down his spinal cord. She jumped away, and he shook his head. She smiled, and snapped her fingers just as the Force lightning flowing down his spine extended into his nervous system, and shocked him from the inside out. He cried out, falling down. "Ah, Ani, are you okay?" "Dang, forget the saber, show me how to do that." "Not right now, okay?" For now, she ran at him, pinning him against the wall. She captured his lips with hers, kissing him until they were both breathless. "For now, let's go to bed." Anakin's eyes grew wide. He took off for his chambers at a run, leaving her to chuckle and follow. Palpatine's office. Her apprentice. He had been crafting Anakin, training Anakin for years. And she barges in, and immediately snaps him up. No. Anakin was his. He stared out across the city, into the GD temple. That dang woman created echoes, so many it was hard to sense anything. It was like a whirlpool. But he would muddle through. As Plagius had taught. Sidious was crafty, no doubt. More crafty than Revan. Maybe in his mind. GD temple. Rev. Anakin called out from where he lay on her bed. "You there?" "Coming," she called. As she emerged, Anakin's jaw dropped. She was magnificent. Tawny gold skin, unmarred except for a single lightsaber scar across her stomach. He traced it with his finger. "How did this happen?" he asked softly. "The sparring match with Malak. He caught me there." If Vander hadn't been there, she trailed off. Anakin stroked her face. "Don't worry. Nothing will ever hurt you with me around." She smiled. "I rather think it's the other way, Han." She smirked. His lips sought hers, and they fell onto the bed. Obi-Wan Anakin's room. "Where is he?" "Where Kano?" "Oh." Obi-Wan halted his pacing. He felt for Anakin, and found him in the next room. He shook his head. Then drifted off to sleep on the couch as Revan's Force persuasion reached him. Around. Morning found the lovers entangled in a set of legs and arms. Revan woke first, and roused Anakin with a light kiss. "There's something I need to take care of. I'll be back soon," she whispered, and slipped out the door. Anakin watched sadly before rising. Revan jumped over the walls, and snuck past the guards. Entering the quiet room, she ignited her saber. "Hello, Padme." "What?" Padme spun around, her loose nightgown flapping around her legs. What she saw was horrible, terrifying. She saw an angel of death, lit by the hellish glow of the black light. Dark shadows lit under her eyes, and a single strand of hair fell over one coal-black eye. The strange lighting threw her pale, alabaster skin into sharp relief. "Oh my God," Padme whimpered. Revan smirked. "You know why I am here, Padme. You got too close to my apprentice. You made him feel, you stupid bench. I am going to kill you for daring to touch Anakin's heart. He is mine. He will always be mine. And I don't care about your little affair in the past, he belongs to me now. But in order for me to bring him fully under my power, I need to eliminate the only other being alive who made him feel the way I do. I need to eliminate you. Padme fell to her knees, overcome with a pure, all-encompassing fear she had never felt the likes of before, even when Anakin had told her what he had done to the Sand People, and her thoughts turned to what he could do to the people of Naboo. The last thing she saw in this world was the black blade arcing towards her neck. Hey handsome, I'm back. Revan whispered as she crawled under the covers and snuggled into Anakin. Come on, beautiful, was Anakin's sleepy reply. He gently snaked an arm around her waist, pulling her in closer. She smiled slightly, satisfied with her hold on him, and fell to sleep. General Skywalker, my condolences. GD Skywalker, I feel for you. What are they talking about? Anakin whispered to Revan as they walked down the street. They turned a corner, and Anakin stopped short. No, Padme's face was everywhere. Senator murdered, proclaimed one. Killer at large. Another screamed. GD kill. Read yet another. Anakin and Revan hurried to the Senate. Anakin, I'm so sorry. I know what she meant to you, Palpatine said as soon as the two walked in. He glared at Revan. She glared back. What? No. Padme was only a friend. Palpatine looked startled. I'm only thinking that Sith must have killed her, otherwise how would she have been killed by a lightsaber? To Palpatine, Revan looked entirely too smug. And the two were too close, with a sense of intimacy that bothered him. With Padme, he could manipulate Anakin. But with Revan as his lover the possibilities were grim. Revan glanced at the other Sith, gauging his reaction to this new turn of events. Palpatine looked thoughtful, as if he were thinking of more ways to turn Anakin. Perhaps Anakin revealing this wasn't such a bad idea. Anakin flopped back on the bed. Good God, Rev. Aren't you tired? You sure tire me, he exclaimed. Revan smirked and cuddled into the warm space he left. Obi-Wan's coming. She sat up. She jumped out of bed. Here. She threw his pants at him, and was pulling on hers as she hopped out of the room. Anakin smiled. Force, he loved that woman. Anakin? Obi-Wan called. Revan opened the door, and he smiled at the young woman. As he detailed his mission, Revan's smile grew wider. Perfect. Palpatine rubbed his temples, forming the dream he wanted to send. In it, Revan was thrashing in pain, and Anakin was held back. Tears streamed down the boy's face. Help me, Revan gasped out. Anakin cried out as she slumped in death. Perfect. All he had to do now is wait. No? Anakin sat straight up in bed, jolted awake by the horrific dream. He turned to Revan, still sleeping next to him, and breathed a sigh of relief. He planted a soft kiss on her cheek, then rose. Anakin, Revan murmured. Just go back to sleep. It's nothing. Revan half smiled. No use trying to lie to a GD boy. Anakin sighed, and sat down on the edge of the bed. Sometimes, I have dreams. You mean premonitions? Anakin blinked. Sometimes it was scary how well Revan could read him. Yeah, I have them too. There was you died. And there wasn't anything I could do. You died right in front of me, and people held me back. Anakin frowned as the details of the dream returned to him. The council. They were the ones who. Anakin, listen to me. If the council were trying to hurt me, I would defend myself, you know that. You would defend me, if it came to that, yeah? Anakin looked into her eyes, the dark black staring into his soul, and he saw the truth. If it came to that, I would kill every member of the council for you. Ani, I would. Let's hope you never have to. But now, we've got to teach you some new moves, don't we? Oh, yes. Anakin ran in the direction of the sparring room, Revan close on his heels. Okay, first one. With your lightsaber, you throw it, and then you use the force to push and pull it, like some sort of remote control toy. Like so. Revan ignited her saber and threw it, using the force to make it describe a heart in the air. You try. After Anakin had gotten the hang of it, they began to spar with the lightsabers in the air, without touching them. Somehow, the sparring session ended in several passionate kisses and a mad dash for Anakin's quarters, but that's a story for another time. Revan lay awake later that night, with Anakin sleeping peacefully beside her. How had he had those premonitions? The council would never try to kill her, and if they did, she could easily Kai Sidious. She snarled. I told him not to mess with my apprentice. Her unique eyes were glowing now, and in her fury, her true aura broke through the fake one. Across the temple, Yoda woke from his meditative state. He felt a fluctuation in the dark side, so he reached out. He found a festering core of dark energy. Then it was gone. Yoda was troubled. A Sith was hiding here. In the morning, Anakin rolled over and pulled Revan tighter against him. She murmured sleepy protests. He stroked her soft hair, murmuring, Don't ever leave me. She completely opened her eyes, and stretched gracefully, like a cat. Do you honestly think I would? She put a finger to his lips as he opened them to speak. I love you, I would never ever leave. Palpatine growled. That bench. She's interfering with my plans. Gleefully, he began to plot a way to kill her. He called in favors from several different bounty hunters, and sent them off with strict instructions to bring back the body. He gave them several Asalamar. Anakin stumbled into the Chancellor's box in the theater, still shaken from his dream. His talk with Master Kenobi had not gone well, and he needed the Chancellor's reassurance that he was not an enemy. Anakin refused to believe that the Chancellor would ever do anything to betray the Republic. You wanted to see me, Chancellor. Yes, Anakin, come closer, I have good news. Anakin knelt beside the Chancellor. Our clone intelligence units have discovered the location of General Grievous. He's hiding in the Utapau system. At last, Anakin exclaimed, relieved. Now the war could end, and he and Revan could spend more time alone. We'll be able to capture that monster and end this war. I would worry about the collective wisdom of the Council if they didn't select you for this assignment. You're the best choice, by far. On the contrary, Chancellor, I think Master Star would be a far better choice for such a dangerous mission. She is far stronger than even I. MMN. The Chancellor did not sound convinced, and Anakin enjoyed the thought that someone believed him to be better than Revan. Sit down. He dismissed the others in the box quickly. Anakin, you know I'm not able to rely on the GD Council. If they haven't included you in their plot, they soon will. Anakin paled. Did the Chancellor know? I'm not sure I understand. You must sense what I have come to suspect. The GD Council want control of the Republic. They're planning to betray me. I don't think that, Anakin. Search your feelings. You know, don't you? It wasn't a question. I know they don't trust you. MMN. All the Senate. All the Republic. All democracy, for that matter. I have to admit, my trust in them has been shaken. Why? They asked you to do something that made you feel dishonest, didn't they? For a non-GD, the Chancellor could be very astute sometimes. Anakin looked down. They asked you to spy on me, didn't they? Anakin shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I don't know what to say. Remember back to your early teachings. All who gain power are afraid to lose it. Even the GD. The GD used their power for good. Anakin exclaimed, but then he remembered Revan's point. The GD were afraid of the Sith, afraid of those who were strong enough to take their power from them. Good is a point of view, Anakin. The Sith and the GD are similar, in almost every way, including their quest for greater power. The Sith rely on their passion for their strength. They think inwards, only about themselves. And the GD don't. The GD are selfless. They only care about others. Anakin turned away. Did you ever hear of the tragedy of Darth Plagueis the Wise? No? I thought not. It's not a story the GD would tell you. It's a Sith legend. Darth Plagueis, Dark Lord of the Sith, was so powerful and so wise that he could use the Force to influence the midichlorians to create life. He had such a knowledge of the dark side, he could even keep the ones he loved from dying. He could actually save people from death. But couldn't Revan? She had said she could, but if the only one who could was a Dark Lord long after her time. The dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some would consider to be unnatural. Well, what happened to him? He became so powerful, the only thing he became afraid of was losing his power. Which, eventually, of course, he did. And fortunately, he taught his apprentice everything he knew. Then his apprentice killed him in his sleep. It's ironic. He could save others from death, but not himself. Is it possible to learn this power? Not from a GD. Mace turned to Anakin after hearing Commander Cody's report. Anakin, deliver this report to the Chancellor. His reaction will give a clue to his intentions. Anakin nodded. Yes, Master. He left. Mace turned back to the others. I sense a plot to destroy the GD. The dark side of the Force surrounds the Chancellor. Kid Adimundi spoke up. If he does not give up his emergency powers after the destruction of Grievous, then he should be removed from office. The GD Council would have to secure control of the Senate in order to have a peaceful transition. Mace replied. Yoda spoke up for the first time. To a dark place this line of thought will carry us. Great care we must take. Palpatine turned at Anakin's entrance. Chancellor. We've just received the report from Master Kenobi. He has engaged General Grievous. Palpatine frowned. We can only hope Master Kenobi is up to the challenge. Anakin turned away. I should be there with him. Anakin lowered his gaze. Upsetting to me to see that the Council doesn't seem to really appreciate your talents. Don't you wonder why they won't make you a GD Master? I wish I knew, Anakin replied. Revan thought it was because they were afraid of him. Privately, he agreed. More and more I get the feeling that I'm being excluded from the Council. He raised his eyes to meet Palpatine's. I know there are things about the Force that they aren't teaching me. They don't trust you, Anakin. He stood. They see your future and they know your power will be too strong to control. You must break through the fog of lies the GD have created around you. Together, they walked down the hall. Let me help you to know the subtleties of the Force. How do you know the ways of the Force? Anakin asked, confused. My mentor taught me everything about the Force. Even the nature of the dark side. Anakin walked in front of the Chancellor to face him. You know the dark side. Anakin glared at him. Anakin, if one is to understand the mystery, one must study all its aspects, not just the dogmatic view of the GD. If you are to become a complete and wise leader, you must embrace the larger view of the Force. Be careful of the GD, Anakin. Only through me can you achieve a power greater than any Jedi. Learn to know the dark side of the Force, and you will be able to save your beloved from certain death. He smiled. What did you say? Anakin glared at Palpatine. Use my knowledge. I beg you. Anakin ignited his lightsaber, blue blade springing to life. You're the Sith Lord. Anakin accused. I know what's been troubling you. Listen to me. Don't continue to be a pawn of the Jedi Council. Ever since I've known you, you've been searching for a life greater than that of an ordinary Jedi. A life of significance, of conscience. Anakin raised his saber as Palpatine circled around him. Are you going to kill me? I would certainly like to. Anakin growled. I know you would. I can feel your anger. His face was rapturous. It gives you focus. It makes you stronger. Anakin smirked. It certainly does. He disengaged his blade. I'm going to turn you over to the Jedi Council. Of course you should. But you are not sure of their intentions, are you? I will quickly discover the truth of this. Anakin replied. You have great wisdom, Anakin. Know the power of the dark side, power to save Revan. Master Windu. Anakin raced to catch up to Mace. I must talk to you. Skywalker. We just received word that Obi-Wan has destroyed General Grievous. We were just on our way to make sure the Chancellor returns emergency power back to the Senate. Anakin shook his head inside. He won't give up his power. I've just learned a terrible truth. I think Chancellor Palpatine is a Sith Lord. Mace leaned in and stared at Anakin. A Sith Lord? Yes, the one we've been looking for. How do you know this? He knows the ways of the Force. He's been trained to use the dark side. Are you sure? Absolutely. Then our worst fears have been realized. We must move quickly if the Jedi Order is to survive. Master, the Chancellor is very powerful. You'll need my help if you're going to arrest him. For your own good, stay out of this affair. I sense a great deal of confusion in you, young Skywalker. There is much fear that clouds your judgment. Anakin held his tongue, wanting to tell Mace how he and Revan had discovered that fear, anger, and emotion in general was helpful. I must go, Master. No? If what you have told me is true, you will have gained my trust. But for now, remain here. Wait in the council chambers until we return. Mace boarded the ship. Yes, Master. Anakin stared after the ship before turning away. Back in the council chambers, he couldn't get Palatine's voice out of his head. He stood and stared out over the city. His gaze focused on the Senate building. Thoughts rushed around his head. Did he save Palpatine? Or let Mace handle it? Tears fell from his eyes. He made his decision. Revan lay in her chambers. She woke with a start. She felt ripples. Echoes. Anakin was close to turning. She smiled. Anakin ran into the Chancellor's office, skidding to a halt at the horror in front of him. 3 dead Jedi lay around his feet, their blood still wet on the floor, and Mace Windu had the Chancellor at saber point. You're under arrest, my lord. Mace Windu snarled at the Sith Lord. Anakin, I told you it would come to this. The Chancellor panted, obviously winded. And I was right. The Jedi have taken over. The oppression of the Sith will never return. You have lost. No? No, 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 you will die. The Chancellor croaked, his voice twisted and warped with the power of the dark side. Blue lightning shot out of his fingers, attacking Windu like living serpents of light. Anakin started. Someone creating electricity, why was that so familiar? Get the traitor. The Chancellor snarled. He is the traitor. Mace shouted back. In desperation, the Sith Lord played his final card. I have the power to save the one you love. You must choose. Don't listen to him, Anakin. Don't let him kill me. The Chancellor was obviously tiring. I can't hold it any longer, I can't, I'm too weak. Anakin, help me. The blue streams of lightning stopped, and Mace leveled his saber at the Chancellor's throat. I am going to end this, once and for all. You can't. Revan. But what would make Windu back down? He must stand trial. He has control of the Senate and the courts. He's too dangerous to be left alive. I'm too weak. Oh, don't kill me, please. It's not the Jedi way. He must live. Please don't. I need him. In slow motion, Anakin saw Windu's arm come up. He would kill his only chance to save Revan. Anakin was in turmoil. He needed to stop the Sith. He needed to save Revan. He should kill Master Windu. He should kill the Chancellor. Suddenly, Revan's face floated to the front of his mind, her smile dazzling him, giving him the answer he so desperately needed to hear. New Anakin brought his lightsaber up and around, slicing clean through Windu's arm. Revan's face smiled at him again, telling him he'd done the right thing. Then the Chancellor shot Windu with even more lightning, throwing him out the window and down, into certain death. What have I done? Anakin asked softly, more of the Revan image than of anyone else. The Chancellor no. The Sith Lord stood and walked in front of him. You are fulfilling your destiny, Anakin. Become my apprentice. Learn to use the dark side of the Force. Revan's image still playing in his head, he could barely mutter, I will do whatever you ask. Good. Just help me save Revan's life, I can't live without her. Even as he spoke, he could feel something reaching out, surrounding him, but it didn't feel cold and dark, like he thought it would. The dark side of the Force was warm, comforting even as he drank it in, embracing it, it wrapped him up even more. But he'd felt it before. Whenever he'd sparred with Revan, whenever he'd used his emotions, this same power wrapped him and protected him with its presence. To cheat death is a power only one has achieved. Anakin's mind protested only one that you know of, but if we work together, I know we can discover his secrets. Something inside of Anakin, something that had been waiting for this day for so long, told him to slide from his bench to a kneeling position in front of his new master. I pledge myself to your teachings. Good. Guad. The Force is strong with you. A powerful Sith you will become. Henceforth, you shall be known as Darth Vader. Thank you, my master. Anakin managed, feeling almost drunk with dark side energy. Rise. His new master commanded. Across the city, Revan froze. So much dark side power had just appeared. Anakin had finally been turned. Revan's only regret was that she hadn't been there to see it. Because the council did not trust you, my young apprentice, I believe that you are the only Jedi with knowledge of what happened here. When the Jedi learn what has transpired here, they will kill us. Along with all the senators. I agree. The council's next move will be against the Senate. Every single Jedi, with the exception of Revan, of course, including your friend, Obi-Wan Kenobi, is now an enemy of the Republic. I understand, Master. But we must move quickly. The Jedi are relentless. If they are not all destroyed, it will be civil war without end. He turned to look at Anakin. First, I want you to go to the Jedi temple. You will catch them off balance. Do what must be done, Lord Vader. Do not hesitate, show no mercy. Only then will you be strong enough with the dark side to save Revan. What about the other Jedi spread across the galaxy? Their betrayal will be dealt with, Sidious said, sitting down in his chair. After you have killed all the Jedi in the temple, go to the Mustafar system. Wipe out Viceroy Gonray and the other separatist leaders. He stared at Anakin, stared deep into his soul. Once more the Sith will rule the galaxy, and we shall have peace. Anakin marched on, inwardly thinking that dastardly music should be playing. The clones marched on behind him. He lit his saber. The blue blade was a blur, quickly cutting down any in his path. The younglings, the knights, the Padawans, all were added to the growing total of bodies. Anakin, no Vader, entered the council chambers. Younglings rushed out from behind the chairs. A small blonde one approached him. Master Skywalker, there are too many of them. What are we going to do? Vader glared at the young boy. He ignited his saber. Revan smiled across the temple. Anakin opened the door. Rev, he called softly. Clones poured into the room. Don't touch her, he snarled. They nodded. Revan. Hello, Vader. Revan rose without turning. How did Vader begin? He stared as Revan opened her door. You're still dark. Did you honestly think that I was a Jedi? You yourself know how powerful the dark side is. I am still Darth Revan, and I always will be. She dropped her cool facade of Dark Lordism. Come here. She held open her arms. As Vader reluctantly hugged her, he whispered. So it was all fake. You don't love me. Revan shoved him away. As if. I wouldn't do that, even as a Dark Lord. I love you, Anakin, no matter what. She allowed her love to shine through into her aura, aware that as he felt it, they formed a bond. I love you, Ani. Don't ever doubt that. He smiled, relieved. Will you forgo Palpatine? Join me. He nodded. Then you should have a new name. Darth Sato, after the Sith Lord Naga Sato. Together, they rose to cleanse the Temple of Life. That bench. He turned to Anakin, and now she'd stolen him. He turned as the door was thrown open. Revan. Palpatine stuttered. Revan snarled, black blades igniting. You will die, Sidious. Vader and Revan advanced on him. Lord Vader. As your master, I command you to kill her. Vader laughed. That's Darth Sato. Sato sneered. Palpatine paled as the stasis was thrown over him. He screamed as Revan's blade descended upon him. He never felt the blow that severed his head. Sato. Revan commanded. Go to the Mustafar system, as Sidious said. Obi-Wan Kenobi will await you there, I have made sure of it. I cut off Melak's jaw to prove my allegiance to the dark side, and you will kill Master Kenobi to do the same. She stripped off her Jedi robes in her rooms in the Jedi temple. She removed a folded robe from her trunk, one that Sato had never seen before. His senses, newly in tune with the dark side, told him that the robes emanated waves of evil. She slipped into them, buckling a belt and attaching her double-bladed lightsaber. What kind of robe is that? Revan smiled, the expression making Sato's heart do backflips the way it always did, before her face turned pale and her eyes that odd yellow, just like his were now. I made it in this Star Forge. They've got decent protection and still allow me to use the Force. As my apprentice, you should have your own. She removed another robe from her trunk and tossed it to him. Unfolding it, he saw that it was very much like hers, except that it had pants instead of the long, loose skirt. He slipped into it and found that she had been telling the truth. He could feel the mesh of the robes that would offer very good protection from not only blasters, but also lightsabers. When Sato looked back at Revan, she was removing another item from her trunk, a mask. She put it on, and he took a step backwards. The thing was almost entirely black, with stripes of red. The horizontal eye slit and vertical slit came together in a T-shape, reminding him of Jango Fett, the bounty hunter who had been killed at the start of the Clone Wars. As she pulled her hood up, she was transformed into a vision of death. A true Sith Lord to the whole galaxy would bend the knee to, out of fear, respect, or love. You are beautiful. She smiled behind the mask, and Sato felt it through the Force. Go now, Sato, and prove your loyalty to the dark side and to me. I shall wait here for Master Yoda. Yoda? But how do you know he will come? She smiled again. I can feel it. Suddenly, the door to Revan's rooms burst open, and Bastila stood in the doorway, red double saber lit and dark GD Master robes on. She stopped short at the sight of a fully armored Revan and Anakin, wearing Starforge robes and emanating darkness. Master. Bastila. You're just in time. Meet Darth Sato. You did it then. You turned Skywalk. Bastila trailed off as the full meaning of Revan's words hit her. Darth Sato. But only Dark Lords receive Master, you. I apologize, Bastila. You've been replaced. Sato, kill her. Sato half bowed, murmuring Master. Then he lit his lightsaber. Try as she might, Bastila was no match for the new Sith. Her last thought was of all she had lost. Revan pulled her comm from his pouch. Canderous, can you hear me? The Mandalorian instantly answered. Yes, Revan. My plan is almost complete. Have you sufficiently been accepted into the fleet to do as you were told? Yes. Good. Proceed with our plan. She disconnected. This is all working out nicely. Exactly as I had hoped, in fact. Except you, my dear. You were a pleasant surprise. She looked at the clock. Of course, there is no reason for you to leave just yet. Sato smirked. He followed his beloved to her bedchamber. On the safer, the separatist leaders cowered in fear. Lord Sidious, he promised us peace. One beg. Sato was silent. With the hiss of a lightsaber, the Nimwitian was silent. The others quickly followed. Sato threw back his head and laughed. GD Master Obi-Wan Kenobi surfaced in the Ranky Tapu waters. He took the breather out of his mouth and took a fresh breath. Why had Cody turned on him? Why had the clones turned on him? He quickly made his way back to the little ship. Senator Organa quickly picked him up. He and Yoda made their way back to Coruscant. They visited the temple. Obi-Wan immediately went to the security holes. Should not watch. Won't like what you see. Yoda spoke. I must know. Obi-Wan's face grew long as he watched his beloved Anakin slay the GD. His eyes hardened when he saw Anakin kneel to Revan. I knew it. This revelation cut through the bonds of insanity Revan had placed on him. I share Revan's using him to rule the galaxy. No. Yoda left the sobbing master. He was headed to the Senate offices. After Sato left, Revan entered Palpatine's office. She had just settled in the chair when Yoda entered the room. Darth Revan. Should have known who you were. Fools were we. He shook his head. Revan snorted. She drew her saber. Yoda followed. Then green clashed on black, and they began an earnest duel. Revan's blade was a solid arc made of light, creating a wall of black as it flew through the air, probing, attacking, defending, striking. Their duel was a master's duel, and Revan soon came to realize that Yoda was at least on par with Melak. She increased the speed of her attacks, still futilely as Yoda continued to block every strike. She channeled her frustration into anger and her anger into power, muttering, "You're good, old man. Almost as good as Vander." Yoda blinked at the mention of that famous GD master, who was lost without explanation almost 4,000 years ago. That tiny lapse in his defenses was enough for her to get one end of her lightsaber under the hilt of his, and force it out of his grasp. She then channeled her fury into Force Lightning, guiding it through her hands and into his body. But where his body had been, a moment ago. For now he was behind her, and retrieving his lightsaber. They met and fought for several minutes, until they were both lathered with sweat and panting for breath. During one short break, when they had both withdrawn to gasp for air and plan their next moves, Revan began to scan her surroundings. A desk, a chair, several seats, nothing she could use until she looked at the ceiling, and there. A beam hanging loose. Hiding her movements with relighting her saber, she force-pulled it until it was almost loose, then pulled Master Yoda under it, and let it fall. She had the element of surprise, but Yoda was fast. The beam only pinned his legs, but that was enough. She leaped over it, and knelt by his head. Time to die, old man. She drove her lightsaber through his head, narrowly missing as he rolled away. She roared as the small master threw her in stasis, leaving the room. Growling, she broke the stasis. Too late. He was gone. Even as she did so, she felt ripples through the force. Sato was killing the separatist leaders. She smirked, then quickly left to board a shuttle bound for Mustafa. Revan disembarked her ship and saw Anak Sato. He had just flipped backwards, engaging Obi-Wan in battle. She hid back, watching her beloved apprentice. Frantically they dueled, blue blades flashing back and forth, twisting and striking, only to be met by the other's blade. Sato drove Kenobi back towards the lava, only to have him twist away back into the center. Sato kicked him square in the chest, so he flew onto a narrow bridge over lava. They entered a room, Sato attacking fiercely. They entered a hallway, lightsabers hitting either side, gauging the metal. As they exited into the room where Sato had slain the separatists, he slammed Kenobi's lightsaber into a control panel. Sato caught him by the throat with his mechanical arm. Kenobi cried out. Sato strained, pushing Kenobi backwards, twisting Kenobi's own lightsaber towards his throat. He fell away as he was kicked in the back. He slammed into him with both feet. Sato ran towards him, only to be knocked down as Kenobi close-lined him with his foot. He slid back as Kenobi called his lightsaber to him. Quickly, Sato called his back in time to block the strike. Sparks flashed as they battled. Each brought their hand around. They strained with the force to shove one another back. Both flew across the room, slamming into a control panel. Sato soared across the room. Neither realized that the strike of their sabers had disabled the shields over the lava. Red lights flashed. A door opened, and Kenobi backed through it. They battled as they backed down the hole. Neither gave an inch. Sato kicked Kenobi in the face. He jumped backwards onto a metal pylon suspended over the lava. Sato followed. Again they dueled, fighting to keep their balance. Temporarily calling truce, they raced off as the lava splashed onto the metal, melting it. They hid from the flying droplets of lava. Metal screamed as it fell. Kenobi and Sato raced, climbing as fast as they could up the falling pylon. Hanging on for dear life, they could only watch as their pylon drifted nearer and nearer to the falls. Still they fought. Grabbing a hanging wire, Kenobi swung away. Sato followed. Sabers crashed. Releasing the wire, Kenobi dropped onto a shielded platform. Sato followed, landing on a small droid. As they battled, they drifted nearer to shore. Fiercer and fiercer they fought. This was a battle of life, and for dominance. I have failed you, Anakin. I have failed you. His blue eyes were sorrowful. I should have known the Jedi were plotting to take over. Sato glared hatefully at his former master. Anakin, Revan is evil. Kenobi cried. From my point of view, the Jedi are evil. Then you are lost. Kenobi replied. They glared at each other. This is the end for you, my master. Sato flipped over Kenobi's head, landing on his platform. He almost fell as Kenobi swung wildly. Kenobi landed upon the shore, slipping slightly on the gravelly rocks. It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. Kenobi smirked. You underestimate my new powers. Revan could see that Sato was about to jump. Both heads whipped around as Revan charged down the hill. Rev. Sato cried. Darth Revan. Kenobi cried at the same time. I'll kill you, Bench. Kenobi snarled. Revan struck him on the head with the hilt of her lightsaber. He crumbled to the ground. Sato lightly landed next to Revan. Do not. How? Revan snorted. I can read you like an open book, even without the bond. Sato pursed his lips. Leave him alive. What? Sato protested. It is more torture for him to see what has become of the Jedi and his old Padawan. He will always remember his failing, and will suffer for it. Revan turned and strode up the hill. Sato followed. Behind them, Kenobi stirred. You were the chosen one. It was said that you would destroy the Sith, not join them. Bring balance to the Force, not leave it in darkness. Sato turned. I hate you. You were my brother, Anakin. I loved you. He reached out and grasped Anakin's lightsaber. Sato turned away. He linked arms with Revan. They boarded her ship. Where are we going? The Star Forge. It's where we met, where we will create our fleet, and from where we will rule our galaxy. Revan replied as she easily punched in the coordinates for Rakata Prime. Create our fleet. The Star Forge is a factory of immense dark side power. It is capable of creating a Star Destroyer-class ship in less than 2 hours, drawing on the dark side energy of the user, and raw matter flowing upwards in a continuous stream from the sun it is suspended above. Ha, Revan smiled. It's a really fast and powerful factory, though. But didn't it freeze you for 4,000 years? Are you sure you want to trust it enough to live there? Sato, the only reason the Star Forge froze me in time was to bring me to you. He knew that with my knowledge of the dark side and your incredible power over the Force, the two of us could create a new Sith Empire that would last for 1,000 years. I still don't trust it. Well, I'll introduce the two of you, and maybe you'll change your mind. Master? If you're hearing voices inside your head, it's usually not a good thing. Trust me. 5 hours later, they slipped out of hyperspace. Observing the Star Forge suspended above the star, Sato could feel the darkness flowing off of it. It was like a dam had been around his senses the last time he was here, and it had been removed. Darkness pressed in on his head, making his vision go dark, and his muscles go weak, and then they vanished. Sato opened his eyes. Suddenly, he could see the Star Forge in incredible detail. As he turned his gaze to the planet below what had Revan called it, Rakata Prime, he realized his eyes could now zoom in on things that were far away. And his muscles felt different, stronger. The gift of the Forge. It can heighten your senses beyond what even the Force can do. This is awesome. Sato muttered, wonder in his voice. Revan laughed and flew the ship into the Star Forge. Walking out of the ship, she commented to the seemingly empty air, hello again. Before Sato could ask who she was talking to, a voice echoed inside his head. Welcome, Lady of Darkness. Welcome, Lord of Darkness. What the heck is that? Revan smiled and turned to him. That was the Star Forge. Welcome home. Then she kissed him, and pulled his hand deeper into the forge and to his destiny. 1 year later, Revan screamed. Her face was pale, luminous in the dim lighting. Sato squeezed her hand reassuringly. The medical droid cooed and placed a small child in Sato's arms. The droid buzzed. Leah. Revan gasped. She screamed again, the glass around her shattering. The floor beneath them shook as Revan unconsciously lost control. Then, her head lolled to the side. The droid brought another child to them. Luke. This time Sato spoke. Revan relaxed tense muscles loosening their rigidness. Revan smiled gently, softly stroking her son's head. They're beautiful, love. Sato whispered. I love you. Her eyes closed, and she drifted off to sleep. Sato smiled lovingly at the light of his life, his Revan. Jedi Master Obi-Wan Kenobi quietly snuck through the twisted maze of halls in the Star Forge. Force, how did anyone get anywhere on here? He opened a door. And quickly shut it. Not that one. He proceeded down the hallway. Opening a door, he found himself on a long bridge, suspended over murky darkness. He shivered. The very air of this place was infused with darkness. Sato quietly slipped from the room, leaving an exhausted Revan behind. Then his face broke into a grin. He was a father. The father of the best twins in the galaxy. And their mother was the most beautiful woman in the galaxy, no, the universe. He headed back to his and Revan's quarters, whistling merrily. Obi-Wan looked up at a pop. Wait, there had not been a ship there before. Had there? The fighter slowly rose, disappearing up above. As he watched, another ship appeared in a puff of white smoke. He gaped. He shook his head and continued down the bridge. He stopped and lifted his head. 2 new life forces, barely an hour old. Revan had given birth. He hurried in the direction of the medbay. The droid looked up and exploded. Obi-Wan sheathed his lightsaber, scooping up the twins. Luke and Leia, eh? The children of the Empress of the Galaxy. He snuck away. Sato woke. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He quickly dressed and rushed to the medical bay. He stuck his head in Revan's room. His lover was still fast asleep. That left the twins. He turned around and hurried down the hall. He opened the door. Droid pieces were scattered across the floor. The twins were gone. Sato roared. He knelt. Lightsaber marks. Kenobi. He growled. His gaze lifted to the empty crypts. His children, the Dark Lord, began to weep. Kenobi lay back, massaging his temples. Didn't those children ever shut up? An hour into the journey, and they hadn't stopped since they boarded. He groaned. Only another hour to Alderaan. He didn't know if he could take it. Senator Organa stared at the man in front of him. Anakin's child. Obi-Wan nodded. And Revan's. Will you raise her and keep her safe? Bail nodded. My wife always wanted a daughter. He took the bundle from the Jedi's arms. She has her father's eyes. Barry took the bundle from Kenobi. We'll keep him safe. I promise. The sandy-haired woman replied. We will not allow Revan or Anakin to take him. He will never know his evil parents. She lovingly took Luke to her husband. Obi-Wan Kenobi sighed. Revan had awoken, found her beloved son gone. Her anguished wails were heard throughout the forge. Everyone avoided her, as she snapped at everyone. Even Sato was wary of her. A mother without her child is a dangerous thing indeed. And 7-year-old Luke Skywalker sat in a classroom, bored out of his mind. That is, until his teacher announced today's subject. The Dark Lady Revan and the Dark Lord Sato, the Sith Lords who ruled the galaxy. The Dark Lady Revan had appeared out of thin air around 19 years ago, found by the Jedi Anakin Skywalker on a routine mission to Star Forge. She was in fact a Sith Lord put in temporal stasis for over 4,000 years. Wow. Luke thought. Who could put her in stasis for that long? He raised his hand. How was she in stasis? Like a tank of something. His teacher smiled and shook her head. No one's really sure. But the briefing from Jedi Skywalker said it appeared she was merely frozen in place and came to life when he approached her. Lady Revan had left Jedi Skywalker and entered the bridge to kill the Sith Lord there. He was Darth Malak, Revan's old apprentice from ancient times. After slaying him, she and Jedi Skywalker returned to Coruscant. No one was aware of her true identity, as she played the part of a redeemed Sith. Several weeks later, the Chancellor of the Galactic Senate was revealed as Darth Sidious, a Sith Lord who had been attempting to rule the galaxy. He took a Jedi as his apprentice, Darth Vader, who was in love with Revan. Vader marched on the Jedi temple, slaying all the Jedi there, save for Lady Revan. When he entered a room, she revealed her identity, and he pledged himself to her. She renamed him Darth Sato, the Sith Lord who rules with her today. Luke found this history fascinating. Revan seemed an interesting personality. A fascinating woman. He found he liked Revan's history more than Sato's only because there was more of it. No one really knew anything about Sato. Lord Sato was a Jedi. No one knew who he had been before he became the Sith Lord, and he wasn't telling. He was an excellent duelist, one of the best ever. His skill with the blade was legendary. While Revan was a manipulator, he was the killer. He led the legions of the Infinite Fleet, and was known a brilliant pilot. Luke decided that someday, he wanted to meet them. 7 years. Revan was still searching. How? Why? Sato entered the room, and blanched as Revan lifted her face. You were thinking about him, weren't you? His voice was soft. She nodded. I miss him so much, Ani. It's like part of me is missing, a part she broke off. Sato enveloped her in his strong arms. I know, love. I miss him too. He looked up at the ceiling. Dang you, Kenobi. Dang you for taking our son away from us. The 16-year-old Luke Skywalker chuckled. He was striding down the street, headed home after buying a part for a glowing Revan. He turned to look. He'd always found Revan and Sato fascinating. Disturbing, but fascinating. Those two are pure evil, mark my words. A new voice joined in. Blew up an entire planetary government. They refused to bow to them. So Revan ordered assassination of the leader. While they were reeling from that, and gathered at his funeral, Sato bombed them all. The first voice replied, they had no regard for the pain and sorrow they caused. No regard for life. The two walked away. Luke turned, and walked back down the street. Sato. Luke turned to see a news holo on. Here, ladies and gentlemen, we have an interview with the ruler of the galaxy, the Dark Lord Sato. The reporter turned to the man on his left. He glowered at the camera. I don't rule the galaxy. Revan does. I just kill stuff. The reporter shrank back slightly, as Sato was fingering the lightsaber at his belt. So you want to hear about the bombing of Darillia? Yeah, I did that. They wouldn't bow to me and Rev, so she killed the president. When they all went to his funeral, I killed the entire system of government. The planet belongs to us now. I don't see why anyone is making such a big deal out of this. The reporter looked frightened. But all those people. What about their families? Sato shrugged. What about him? They wouldn't bow to us, so I killed them. What's the big deal? It's just a few hundred lives, it's not like they were important or anything. Sato stood and left. The terrified reporter fled. Luke shuddered. Long ago he'd abandoned the notion he wanted to meet Revan and Sato. They were absolute evil. They didn't care for human life, or any other kind for that matter. They didn't seem human anymore. Revan was furious. Sato was outraged. 16 years, and Kenobi still evaded them. Their son was out there somewhere, and they couldn't find him. Lost, missing his parents. What lies had Kenobi fed him? Had he told them they were dead? Or Sato shuddered. Had he given him to some random family, and left, leaving no idea of who he was? Ben? Luke's voice echoed across the distance between him and the Dark Lord, who stood on the other side of the gap in the floor, alerting all the stormtroopers in the way to his presence. Slowly, the tall man who now stood over the pile of robes that had been Ben Kenobi, turned to face him. Luke's breath stopped as he looked at Darth Sato, Dark Lord of the Sith, and consort to Darth Revan, Empress of the Galactic Empire. Suddenly, Sato was no longer 30 feet away, across the room. He was right in front of Luke, not 2 feet from his face. The waves of evil were so strong, so powerful, they forced Luke to his knees within a matter of seconds. He looked up, and up, and up, until his gaze met Sato's strange, unique yellow eyes. He knew in that instant that he was dead. He closed his eyes, waiting for the blow that would separate his head from his shoulders. It never came. Luke opened his eyes, confused. He looked at Sato again, but this time he blanched. Sato was grinning. Not just grinning, laughing. The Dark Lord of the Sith was laughing at him. And then he wasn't. Like someone had flipped a switch in his head, he stopped laughing and became deadly serious. Then, slowly, a small smile slid over his face. Raising his hand, he gently placed his fingers on Luke's forehead, and trailed them down to his chin. The touch felt so good, so right, that Luke's eyes closed involuntarily, and he shivered. 2 hands cupped the sides of his face, gently, so gently. Luke couldn't even conceive that this man, the one who had just killed Ben, could possibly be so soft. His eyes opened again, and he looked at Sato. Sato was still smiling, but it seemed tinged with sadness, grief, and was that pain. You are so beautiful. He whispered, a note of wonder in his voice. Luke's brow crinkled in confusion. Was Sato gay? No, he was with Revan, and he would never leave her. Then why? Sato's fingers were on his temples. Sleep, the Dark Lord whispered. Luke was suddenly overcome with an exhaustion the likes of which he had never felt before. He didn't even have a chance to yawn before he descended into a deep dreamless sleep. He didn't feel Sato pick him up and sling him over his shoulder, didn't hear Leia's cry, and Han's leave him, Princess, we have to go. He didn't wake even as the falcon took off with a roar, or as Sato muttered, you really need to eat more, son, while strapping him into the copilot seat of a 2-man starship, and setting a course for Rakata, the capital of the Empire, and the star forge that was his home. Where am I? Luke was swimming in an inky black pool. It was warm, not unpleasant at all, and he felt relaxed, lethargic. What is this place? Suddenly, he was surrounded by a presence. It felt warm, comforting, and held him like a father would hold his child. Not that he'd ever had a father, only Uncle Owen, but it was how he imagined being held by his father would feel. Wake up, Luke. Wake up. Was he sleeping? Open your eyes. I am here. He knew that voice, didn't he? Ben? Wake up. No, it wasn't Ben. He liked the old man, but this voice he trusted. This voice had sounded like how his father should sound. Slowly, Luke opened his eyes, shaking off the last throes of unconsciousness. Dark space came into focus, dotted with glimpses of metal. Hundreds of glimpses of metal. Thousands. Luke asked as what he was seeing registered in his mind. Ships. Lots and lots of ships. The infinite fleet. A voice noted from next to him. Luke couldn't tear his gaze away from the fleet long enough to look at whoever it was. And beyond that is the Star Forge. Down there is Rakata Prime, the capital of the Empire. Belatedly, Luke noticed a giant planet off to his right. Then the voice registered. Half dreading who he would find, he slowly turned to his left, to the pilot's seat. Long, dark blonde hair barely brushed the tops of his shoulders. Blue eyes, so much like Luke's own, peered out from under dark brows. Darth Sato smiled at Luke, lifting his left hand and saying howdy. He was reclining in the chair, seeming completely at ease. Not that he shouldn't be, considering he was a fully trained Sith Lord with a lightsaber clipped to his belt, and Luke had had perhaps half dozen hours of training with a lightsaber that had conspicuously gone missing. Luke instinctively cowered away from the Dark Lord, into the back of his seat. Briefly, an emotion that looked strangely like hurt flickered across Sato's face, before it vanished. Anyway, as I was saying, Rakata Prime is the capital of the Empire, officially, but Revan and I live on this Star Forge. He nodded towards an enormous space station. Luke blinked. There appeared to be a stream of plasma flowing upwards from the sun into the forge. Even as he opened his mouth to ask Sato about it, he said, I don't get it, so there's no point in asking me about it. If you're really curious, you should ask Revan. I always sort of blanked out whenever she started to get all technical on me. Sato's eyes glazed over, as if he were remembering some distant memory. And we're going to the forge. This was the Dark Lord everyone feared. But he was acting like a love-struck teenager with a sense of humor. But why me? What's so special about me? I'm just a farm boy from Tatooine, nothing special. Why didn't you kill me? Suddenly, Sato was not the man who had been laughing, joking, and talking a moment before. He was dark, pure dark. Don't ever say that. Don't you ever even think that. You're special, to me and to Revan. Never say that again. Luke shrank back even further into his seat, feeling that this was the Sato everybody whispered about. Sato glanced at him, shaking and cowering, and changed again, right before his eyes. Sorry about that. The forge gets to me sometimes. Anyway, Revan is informing me of all the terrible, horrible things she is going to do to my genitals if I waste one more minute lollygagging out here, so we should probably get going. Sato winced, and then said, oh, come on, love. That would hurt, to the seemingly empty air. He accelerated the ship towards the Star Forge. This is really cool. Luke looked around the enormous room, stretching his legs from the long flight. Next to him, Sato was doing the same thing, only a little more vigorously. Sato slipped into a full split, and then raised himself up so he was straddling the floor, and turned to his left. He made his forehead touch his knee, held for a few seconds, and repeated the movement on his right. Then he stood up and shook out his legs. Lord Sato. Just Sato. He smiled at Luke. Lord Sato makes me feel like I'm in some sort of diplomatic meeting. I hate diplomats. Revan's the diplomat. I just kill things. Why are there people following us? Sato blinked, and looked around. There were holoporters with cameras all over. Huh. Good question. Then he turned dark again. I don't know who gave you permission to be here, he said, voice carrying to even the farthest reaches of the room, but this is my home. And you will all get out. Every single one of those reporters scampered like wamprats. Right, so the factory's this way. He jerked with his thumb. Factory? Well, we can't have you meeting the Empress of the Galaxy dressed like that, can we? Luke looked from Sato's immaculate black robes to his garbage-stained and wrinkled-off white ones, and blushed. Sato had led him to a smallish, circular room before the rest of his statement sunk in. Wait, Empress. Sato blinked. Yeah, I'm taking you to meet Revan. Something wrong. Darth Revan. Sato nodded. Dark Lady of the Sith, Revan. Another nod. She's great. You love her. She's the Empress. I'm a farm boy. Farm boys don't meet empresses, they meet, well, Jawas and traders. Sato smiled and poked him on the forehead. Not this farm boy. This very special farm boy is getting a chance to be a big boy for once, and meet the mean, nasty Revan. It wasn't the words that were insulting, it was his tone. He cooed to Luke, like talking to a baby. Then he was serious again. Well, as serious as he ever was. Right, so you're what, 19? Yeah, 19. Okay, so Sato punched a couple of buttons on the console in front of him. There was a humming noise, and suddenly the Durasteel container near the wall was surrounded in a white glow. After it faded away, Sato crossed over to it and opened it up. Sitting in the bottom of the bin were 5 folded robes. Removing them, he set 4 on the top of the container, and held the 5th up to Luke. He nodded curtly, satisfied that it would work, before grabbing the others and walking out of the room. Luke looked between him, the pile of robes in his hands, and the Durasteel container, before sprinting to catch up. Wait. How did that thing do that? I told you it was a factory, didn't I? Yeah, but it was empty, and then it wasn't. Sato grinned at him again as he stepped into an elevator. That's the Star Forge. It defies logic. And gravity. He punched a button for a specific floor. Looking, Luke noticed that it was the second from the top. It was labeled Living Quarters. Suddenly, the space station rumbled. Sato looked around, and then commented, well, you do. Rumble. You're floating above the sun without falling in. Rumble. Yes, you're a very powerful dark side artifact. I'm sorry, are you talking to a wall? Sato looked at him and blinked. You mean you can't hear it? Hear what? Sato shook his head. I never thought Obi-Wan would be desperate enough to bring an untrained apprentice to kill me. Luke suddenly remembered what Sato had done. You killed him. Old Ben. You killed him. Sato blinked. Yeah, I did. I do that a lot. Luke realized what was wrong. This man had no compassion for any other life. No matter how open he was, no matter how much like a little kid he acted, Luke had to remember that. Sato was a Sith Lord, and Sith Lords were evil. Suddenly, a hand grabbed his. He barely processed that it was Sato's before his hand was pressed against the cold wall of the Star Forge. Do you feel it? Sato asked, his voice low. Feel the vibrations, the hum of the engines. Luke was almost in a trance. The hum flowed through his bones, seeped into his mind, beat with his heart. He nodded. Listen to it. Clear your mind, and just hear. Slowly, a voice seeped through the hum, feeding straight into his mind. Welcome, son of darkness. Luke's eyes flashed open, and he gasped in shock and wrenched his hand away from the wall. What he stared at his hand. Whatever he had touched had felt warm, soothing, like when he could tell where the blaster bolts were coming from on the Falcon when Ben was still alive. You are good. He glanced at Sato, who was staring at him. Not many Padawans, even fully trained ones, could hear the forge that quickly. You are very strong with the Force, young one. Sato shook himself. Anyway, we're here. He stepped out of the elevator to a richly furnished hall. There were perhaps a half-dozen doors on either side, evenly spaced, so there was about 30 feet between them. Walking along, Sato brought him to the last door on the right side. Immediately across from his door was one labeled Lady Revan and Lord Sato. Right, so this is your room. Sato opened the door labeled Luke Skywalker, which Luke found vaguely disconcerting, and Luke forgot everything. The place screamed of more wealth than Luke had ever imagined. It was all decked out in black, white, and silver, and there were hundreds of furnishings. Through here is your refresher, and that's your bed, obviously. Sato plunked 4 of the robes on the bed, then tossed the other one at Luke. Go take a shower and get changed. Still dazed, Luke ran to do as Sato had asked. The water was amazing, at a perfect temperature. He stood under the pulsing jets until every speck of dirt was gone, and then even longer, because it felt so good. When he stepped out, he looked at the robes with apprehension. If he took the robes, would he be turning his back on Ben? Eventually, the fact that he was freezing made his choice for him. It took him several minutes to figure out how to get into the complicated robes, but once he did, they fit perfectly. It was almost like they were made for him. Oh? Duh. They were. His only complaint was that they were all black, but that could be excused. Over a loose long-sleeved undershirt was a black vest, made of shiny leather. Around his waist was a broad belt with several loops, presumably for the lightsaber he no longer had. His pants were loose and full, ending in mid-calf-length boots. He felt like a GD from the Holovids, except that GD normally dressed in earth tones like brown and tan, not black. He walked out of the refresher to find Sato, showered and dressed in different robes, sitting cross-legged on the bed. Sato opened his eyes when the door hissed open, and smiled. He unfolded his legs and walked over to Luke. His hands were on Luke's shoulders, straightening creases and perfecting wrinkles, when Luke asked, "Where's my lightsaber?" "Actually, it isn't yours. It belongs to your father." "I know. Ben told me." Sato's hand stilled at the mention of Kenobi, and his face grew taut for a moment before relaxing again. "Really? What else did that idiot tell you about your father?" "He told me you killed him. That you were a student of his, before you went to the dark side. That you betrayed both him and my father, and killed my father. I guess you finished the job you started." He jerked his shoulders out of Sato's loose hold. "HMN. I suppose that's true, from a certain point of view. Not from mine, but from Kenobi's." Sato looked pained again. "Anyway, Revan wants to meet you. Come on." He spun and walked out of the door. Luke followed, having nothing else to do and slightly afraid of what would happen if he refused. Sato knocked on the door across from his. "Rev, love. Are you awake?" No answer. "It's Sato." Instantly, whoever was on the other side of the door perked up. "Ani. Welcome home. Get in here." Sato hesitated, glancing at Luke. "Rev, love. Are you naked?" "Yes. Get dressed and meet us in the throne room." "Okay." Sato pivoted and headed back to the elevator. Luke, after sparing a glance at the closed door, followed. "What did she call you?" "What?" "Ani. It's a nickname." "How do you get Ani out of Sato?" "You don't know? Most people change their names when they become Sith. Well, except for Revan. She's always been Revan. But Revan knew me before I was Sato. Ani's from then. So what's your real name?" Sato grinned at him. He seemed to do that a lot. "Wouldn't you like to know?" They had arrived at the elevator. "Come on. I'm going to see what you know." He punched the button for throne room. A short ride later, they came to a large 3-level room. Up at the top, there was a perfect view of the Infinite Fleet. Luke realized that it really lived up to its name. He couldn't see any space where there wasn't a ship. And there, a white cloud of light, and another ship appeared. "Catch." Suddenly, a small metal cylinder was tossed to him. A lightsaber. Not any lightsaber, Luke realized. His saber. His father's saber. Snap hiss. Sato had lit his own saber, and was beckoning Luke to light his. He did so clumsily, the blue blade extending. So, you trained under Obi-Wan, right? Was he as much of a prick with you as he was with me? No, old Ben was great. He taught me about the Force. HMN. Not much about it, if you can't even shield your thoughts from a simple probe. What? Suddenly, Luke felt a burning, stabbing pain in his head. It was like someone was turning his brain into mush, probing into his memories, his thoughts, ripping into his innermost self. Push me out, Luke. What? Push me out. Imagine a wall, and put me on the other side of it. Whatever works. Luke tried. A huge durasteel wall, keeping the pain on one side and himself on the other. But his wall kept cracking, being broken and invaded, and the pain returned. Come on, Luke. It's not that hard. Even an idiot like Kenobi could do it. Heck, even that idiot of a father of yours was better at shielding than you. That was it. Sato had insulted Ben and his father for the last time. Luke gathered all his rage, all his hatred, all the frustration and pain and anger he felt at the Sith inside his mind and pushed. Suddenly, he was back in reality, and Sato was flying into the wall 20 feet away. He became aware of a light feminine laugh from somewhere behind him. Ani, you got whipped by a Padawan. Shut up, Rev. Sato groaned, obviously not in the mood for talking. Darth Revan, Empress of the Galaxy, Dark Lady of the Sith, and lover of Darth Sato was in the room. Sato turned to his beloved. Luke followed his gaze. Rev. Sato rushed forward, picking her up in his arms. Their lips crashed on one another's, looking like the very picture of a loving couple. Put me down, you great lummox. Revan yelled, half-heartedly beating on his broad back. Sato grinned, spinning her in a circle before placing her down. I miss you, love. She whispered before turning to Luke. Hello. He'd never seen a picture of the Empress without her mask, so his first sight of the feared Empress was misleading. Dark black hair fell down her back, tightly braided, except for the two pieces that fell across those eyes. Those yellow topaz eyes bored into him, until he wanted to confess every bad thing he'd ever done, just so she stopped. He shivered. How it radiated from her, until one wanted to throw themselves on her mercy. He gulped. All in all, he was surprised at the woman who was the most feared person in the galaxy. He had assumed that the appearance would reflect her personality. Not this gorgeous woman in front of him. The only sign of her corruption was the pale alabaster color of her skin, and the stark contrast of the veins against it. He looked towards Sato. The man's normal grin was gone. In his place was a stare of great intensity, and then his eyes softened. You know how much I hate leaving you. He whispered, Luke totally forgotten. And I hate it when you're gone. But come on, we have work to do. She turned back to Luke, whose mind was still reeling from her first attack. Looking into her golden eyes again, he felt the same presence that he had the first time. Only now, with his defenses almost gone from Sato's attack and Revan's mind-affecting influence, he didn't have anything to throw up against her second onslaught. In short, he was on his knees again before he could blink. In his eyes, she was transformed from beautiful woman to goddess in flesh, absolute perfection in every way. Was she here to make him her priest, her acolyte, her servant? He would worship at her feet until the end of his days, without question or hesitation or, Rev, love, turn off the hypnosis. Revan looked startled for a moment. Hypo, right. Sorry. Instantly, the force in Luke's mind telling him to prostrate himself before her vanished. It was replaced with confusion as to exactly when Sato and Revan had grown so tall, until he realized he was on his knees. Blushing slightly, he rose and dusted off the dirt on the fine black cloth of his pants. Then, for some reason, there was a hand in his line of sight. Hi. My name is Darth Revan. She chirped happily, as if she were some random farmhand introducing herself instead of the Empress. You're Luke Skywalker, right? Yeah. Suddenly, she sobered. Then, apparently without knowing, she repeated the movement Sato had made. She gently cupped his head in her hands and looked at him. She didn't stop there, though. As a look of wistfulness, a look of longing, stole over her face, she gently traced his every feature. She outlined his nose with her thumb, stroked the curves of his mouth, and traced his fine, high cheekbones with an index finger. You were right, Ani. He is beautiful. Why do you people keep saying that? Luke demanded, and then realized whom he was talking to. I mean, that is to say. Revan laughed lightly. It's alright. You probably have no idea what's going on. That could be a little confusing. Do you think? Luke was appalled at himself. Why was he being so candid? What was it about these two that made him drop his guard, that felt so right, so good? Revan laughed again, easily. Well now. Sato, you were beginning to train the boy. She swept up the stairs and seated herself on the large throne overlooking the infinite fleet. Sato placed himself at her right hand, perhaps a foot or two behind her. Instantly, they transformed from teenage lovers to the rulers of the galaxy. Let's see what he can do. Sato bowed to his master, and vanished. Luke spun in circles, trying to locate him, to no avail. Then the voice, the one that sounded like his father, the one that he now realized was Sato, spoke in his mind again. Luke, listen to me. Cast out your senses. Don't rely on your eyes. What? But wasn't that what Ben had been training him to do? This was just like the exercise with the droid on the Falcon. Luke knew how to do this. Closing his eyes, he breathed out, letting his anger and frustration, all his emotions, flow out with his breath until, ow, the lightsaber impacted the back of his leg. It was set on the lowest power, so it only stunned, but it still hurt. Lesson 1. Luke turned. Sato stood behind him, his face a mask of disapproval. Emotions equal good. Suppressing them equals bad. Use your emotions to find me, not some inner peace preached by boring, senile old men. But Ben told me that emotions lead to the dark side. Well, duh. That's kind of the point. The dark side corrupts. It kills and people who are innocent get hurt. Luke started choking up. Like Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen. That idiot sent you to live with Owen and Beru on Tatooine. Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru raised me after you murdered my father. Then stormtroopers came and murdered them. Sato frowned, looking far away. I like Beru. She was nice. I hated Owen's guts, but Beru was nice. Of course, Owen hated my guts too, so he shrugged. Then, in a move Luke would never have expected, Sato hugged him. At first, Luke was too surprised to move. The Dark Lord of the Sith was hugging him. After he got over his initial shock, he remembered the sound of lightsaber hitting robes and old flesh, and tried to struggle. When Sato only held him tighter, Luke stopped fighting and relaxed. Almost instantly, a familiar feeling of warmth swept over him. As he relaxed into Sato's arms, the dam he had put up against his emotions vanished, and, for the first time he could remember since he was very young, he started to cry. Softly at first, then the tears came faster, until he was shaking with them. He cried for Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru, he cried for Ben, he cried for Alderaan, he cried for the father and mother he had never known, and for the way he felt when Sato held him. Why? Why? Why did Aunt Beru have to die? Why did Ben have to go and leave me all alone? Why did you kill my father? Luke sobbed, beating on Sato's chest as the Dark Lord hugged him. I didn't. Sato's voice said softly. Luke, still in hysterics, didn't understand. I didn't kill Anakin Skywalker. I couldn't. It would be impossible. Then who did? No one. Anakin Skywalker is still alive. No, he's not. He couldn't be. He never would have left me on Tatooine if he was. Sato looked sad again. He looked for you. He searched everywhere that he could think of. But Obi-Wan Kenobi hid you from him. For 18 years, just after you were stolen from him, he tried to find you. He couldn't. Where is he? Sato looked at him, looked deep into his eyes, deep into his soul. You know where he is. For that matter, you know where your mother is, too. And as Luke stared into those golden yellow eyes, bits and pieces of the last few days flashed through his mind. You are so beautiful. A sad look in Sato's eyes whenever he talked about Luke's past. A feeling of almost instant familiarity with Sato and Revan. The way Sato always tried to make Luke feel at home. Really? What else did that idiot tell you about your father? He told me you killed him. That you were a student of his, before you went to the dark side. That you betrayed both him and my father, and killed my father. I guess you finished the job you started. HMN. I suppose that's true, from a certain point of view. Not from mine, but from Kenobi's. Right? So you're what, 19? Yeah, 19. The room that had been pre-prepared for him. Where's my lightsaber? Actually, it isn't yours. It belongs to your father. So, you trained under Obi-Wan, right? Was he as much of a prick with you as he was with me? It's alright. You probably have no idea what's going on. That could be a little confusing. You think? Ani? Welcome, son of darkness. Ani, you got whipped by a Padawan. Ani? Anakin Skywalker. Skywalker. Sato. Luke looked at Darth Sato, and then he saw him. Wavy blonde hair. Blue eyes. Powerful in the Force. Defensive of Luke the way a father was defensive of his son. His father was Anakin Skywalker. His father was Darth Sato, Dark Lord of the Sith. His mother was Darth Revan, Dark Lady of the Sith. He fainted. Sato looked at the young man in his arms, then at his lover. Revan. I think I broke him. Leia sighed. Her mind drifted back to the Death Star, and the young boy they'd left behind. Something connected her to him. It felt so right to be near him. Like the brother she'd never had. Princess. A text voice shook her from her thoughts. They're waiting for you. Leia nodded. She went into the meeting room. The officers of the Rebel Alliance stood. She smiled. Please, sit. We need to launch an attack on the Star Forge. We have a duty to a boy captured by Darth Sato. He helped Solo rescue me, and deserves the same. Leia said. But Princess. That would be so foolhardy. Leia cut him off. Solo and I will go alone, and sneak aboard. They gaped at her. But, it's too dangerous to risk our people. This is something I must do. She turned on her heel, and left. She found Han outside working on the Falcon with Chili. Come on, smuggler. We have a job to do. He has my eyes. Yeah, but he's got my build. My hair. My lips. Your lips. Sato agreed, smiling as he leaned in and planted a kiss softly on Revan's mouth. They were watching their son as he slept in the room prepared on the Star Forge for him. He looked peaceful when he slept, a pale angel in a room of darkness. He was a bright white light in the Force, a light that now had a tinge of darkness in his core. Even as they watched, the light dimmed and darkness took over a little more. As he sleeps, he realizes that he is our child. He will pledge himself to us willingly soon enough. Looking good in black is from me. Sato put in, smirking at his lover. And I don't look good in black. You don't look good. You look delicious. Sato kissed her gently, then jerked his head in the direction of their quarters. Revan smiled, nodded, and moved out of the door in silence. Sato, with one last glance at the son he had finally found, turned and followed. Some time later, Luke awoke in darkness. He was completely disoriented, and, without knowing, sent waves of fear and panic through the Force. Almost instantly, Sato and Revan appeared in his doorway. Sato had a loose pair of trousers on, leaving his chest bare, while Revan appeared barely clad in a bathrobe. Luke? What's the matter? You were sending so much fear to us we thought you were being kidnapped. Revan's voice was heavy with concern. Luke trailed off as memories began to hit him. The Star Forge. The talking Star Forge. Sato showing him how to shield. His temper tantrum. And then no Force. His father came closer and sat on the edge of the bed, near his right hand. Slowly, Sato reached out and gently tucked a strand of Luke's hair behind his ear. What is it? Tell me it's not true. Luke whispered, a look in his eyes like a caged animal, desperate for reassurance. Tell me I'm not. Please, just. You can't be, just tell me it's a lie. Sato's hand retracted, a look of pain on his face. I can't. Please, son, you have to understand. No? I'm not your son. You're mistaken. You're wrong. Luke doubled over, clutching at his head and sobbing. You're wrong. Sato gently sat on the bed and pulled Luke's sniveling form close to his chest. Luke was slender enough to fit on his lap, curled into a ball. Sato hugged Luke's body close, letting the boy rest his head on his chest. Gently, he began to stroke Luke's hair, rocking back and forth in a soothing motion. Even after Luke's tears had subsided, he held the boy like that, stroking his hair and calming him. SHH, it's okay. It's okay, Luke. You're here now. I love you, you know that. Revan sat on the other end of the bed, and placed her soft, cool hand under Luke's damp chin, gently making him look at her. We both love you, Luke. Luke could see it in her eyes and sense it through the Force. She was telling the truth. He took a deep breath. I know. For my entire life, my father was a pilot. A simple pilot on a freighter during the Clone Wars. 2 days ago, I find out my father was a GD, a student of Obi-Wan Kenobi. Then my uncle and aunt, the only family I had, were killed by Imperials. Then Ben died. And now, I find out that not only are both my father and mother alive, they rule the galaxy. How am I supposed to react? Sato and Revan exchanged glances. What do I say? I don't know, you've spent more time with him. He trusts you. Just say something father-like. That helps a lot, Rev, thanks. Anytime, love. Sato sighed. Listen, I know you're a little disappointed. But you have to understand, everything I said to you was true. We didn't know if you were still alive. We've been searching for you ever since Kenobi stole you from us. Please, Luke, just give us a chance. Luke took a deep breath. Well, you haven't exactly killed anyone in front of me, except for Ben. And I guess I can understand why you hated him. So I'm willing to give this a try if you are. Sato smiled, relieved. Then go back to sleep, son. Tomorrow, we begin your training. Trot training. Luke yawned, as his eyes began to close. We make a Sith out of you yet. Sato whispered to the almost unconscious boy. "'Kay, Dad, whatever you say." And then he was gone. Revan ran a hand through her hair. She smiled, watching her two favorite men in the galaxy duel. One looking like the red lightsaber he held was merely an extension of his body, a part of him. The other, well, he had much improved. Sweat ran down Luke's face. He strained with all his might, swinging at Sato. He still couldn't even land a hit on the Dark Lord. Then, Sato retracted his saber. Caught off balance, Luke stumbled. He looked up. Revan had entered the room, and was leaning casually on the door. "He's all yours, love." Sato looked exactly as he had earlier, impeccable, not a spot of sweat. "Mimi." Revan sauntered in. "Ready, Luke?" As always, her voice surprised him. Soft, utterly feminine. "Yes, Mom." He answered sarcastically. Revan gracefully knelt into a meditative pose. Luke clumsily followed suit. Sato watched from the door. His son. The Dark Lord grinned, and watched as Revan corrected Luke's stance. Luke's aura was much different, as it had been ever since he had joined them. The red was now black, and had almost completely covered the white. Red streaks shot through what little white remained. He shook his head. They were finally ready to go after Luke. Han shook his head. That kid had no idea what he was in for. "Hey, Princess. Where exactly are we going?" Han shouted out the door. "Akata Prime. The Star Forge hovers over it, and that's Revan and Sato's home. They would have taken him there." Lee replied, walking into the cockpit. Han programmed the coordinates. "Here we go." They jumped to hyperspace. "Luke, get up." Sato's voice came through the thin durasteel door. Luke, still half asleep, moaned and flicked his hand. The Force locked the door without him getting out of bed. Breakfast is ready in our room when you're done being lazy. Instantly, Luke's eyes shot open, his covers flew back, and a set of black robes floated into his arms. He dashed for his refresher, reflecting on the past 5 days. His control over the warmth that he now knew was the living force had exponentially increased ever since he had begun using his emotions to make things move. His skill with the lightsaber had also improved to where he was blocking almost half of his father's attacks. Considering his father had been known as one of the best duelists even when there were hundreds of GD made that seem a little more impressive. He was showered, dressed, and dashing for his parents' room within 10 minutes. His parents. It was amazing how easily that thought came to him after only 5 days in their presence. They loved each other, and they loved him, and he loved them back. Even after only 5 days, he knew he would do anything to be able to stay with them. Is there any food left? He burst into their room. The rulers of the galaxy were relaxing in chairs around a low table, laughing at some joke Luke had just missed. Piled on top of the table was the massive amount of food he had come to realize was standard here, as Sato could pack it away faster than a half-dozen teenage boys. Always. Come here. Revan held out her arms, and Luke obligingly hugged her. When Sato repeated her movement, Luke groaned and hugged him quickly too. He sat down in the extra chair, between Revan and Sato. I was wondering. You were 25 when you had me, right Mom? 24, right? So why do the two of you look like you're only in your late 20s? You'd be, like, 40 odd. 43. Sato corrected. Well, once we reached about 26, our aging process has slowed down. We're only appearing to age maybe a year per every, 6 or 7 years that pass. The last was aimed at Revan, who nodded in agreement. It'll probably do the same for you. We figure it's because we've got such a strong connection to the Force. Suddenly, both Sato and Revan stopped talking. Their heads shot up unanimously, their eyes focusing on something far away. The Alderaanian princess, Sato commented. Yes, and another. A Corellian. Revan muttered. Luke's eyes opened. Leia and Han. Sato and Revan startled exchanged glances. Leia. Yeah, the princess. Her name's Leia. Coincidence? No such thing. Plan? Mom? Dad? What are you talking about? Your friend, Princess Leia, and Han, was it? They're on their way here right now. They will be here in perhaps an hour, most likely to attempt to rescue you. But I don't want to be rescued, Dad. I know. Sato turned to his wife. Again, plan. Capture and detain. Wouldn't work. The princess has been trained to resist truth serum, and someone taught her how to shield. I couldn't break her defenses. The smuggler might not have defenses like hers. The smuggler also wouldn't know anything of use. We need to find out what the rebels are planning, which means we either need to get into her mind or get a spy in the rebel base who can contact us. Luke had remained silent, almost lost at the furious pace the duo discussed and shot down courses of action, but now he spoke up. They're coming for me, right? Yes, Sato replied, but I don't see, and I can talk to you through the Force from a long ways away, right? Yes, Revan murmured, not at all pleased with where this was going. And they trust me already, so if I were to let myself get captured and not tell them who I really was, they'd probably let me in on their plans. No? Absolutely not. We just found you, and I don't want to lose you again. So come up with a better idea. Silence. So then, what do I need to do? Han dove, and weaved around the fighters careening towards them. Shots rang out, and one hit the Falcon. Han swore. Han, look out. Leia grabbed his arm. As much as he liked it, he kept his mind focused. He glided into a hangar. Does it seem like they were purposely missing there at the end? He asked. Leia shrugged. Quick. He opened the smuggling hatch, and shoved Leia inside. What the oomph? Leia grunted as she folded herself into the small space. Han shushed her. All clear. Came the call a few minutes later. Leia happily burst out. She straightened her dress with a scowl for Han. Luke arranged his things so when they came he could easily grab it. His father had his lightsaber, he would need to go get it. Dad? He called across the hall. When no one answered, he pressed an ear to the door. He quickly backed off, blushing. Belatedly he noticed the paper on the door. Luke, your lightsaber is on your dresser. Love, Dad. He hurried back into his room, not wanting to interrupt his parents. Hurry up. Leia hissed. Han was peering at a console. He'd drawn up the floor plan for the living quarters. Man, this place is huge anyway, Luke's over here. So we'll go, it looks like across the bridge is quickest. He pointed to a room with the name Luke Skywalker on it. Leia nodded. They quietly left the room. Han was at the door when he realized Leia wasn't with him. He cursed and turned. She was staring up, pale. Princess. Leia pointed a quivering hand. Han lifted his gaze to where hers was, and paled alongside her. Ships. Millions upon millions. As he watched, another Star Destroyer was created in a puff of white smoke. Leia was horrified. How could the rebels ever hope to defeat them? With the infinite fleet at their disposal. Darth Revan and Darth Sato were the embodiments of pure evil. They were twisted by the dark side, with no hope of redemption. In other words, to win, they must be destroyed. Leia dragged herself away from the side of the Infinite Fleet, following Han across the bridge and up to the room marked Skywalker. As the door slid open, they were amazed at the luxury of the room. It wasn't even by the farthest imagination a cell, richly furnished and obviously expensive. Luke sat cross-legged on the bed, reading a datapad. He glanced up as they walked in, then blanched and looked again. Leia. Han. The youth flung himself off the bed, running to hug them enthusiastically. Leia remembered the childlike exuberance from the first time she had met him, aboard the Death Star. How did you guys get here without Sato and Revan finding you? Han smirked, his smuggler charm showing through. I'm just that good. Come on, we're here to rescue you. Luke's eyes widened. Oh, right. He hurriedly spun about, heading for the bed to gather his things. As he did so, Leia noticed that he was clothed in brand new robes, dark black and distinctly Jedi-like. Luke, where'd you get the clothes? Luke looked down, and smoothed out the fine black fabric. Darth Sato gave them to me. I think he wanted to turn me to the dark side. I don't know why he didn't just kill me, though. He packed a small bag with 3 extra robes, 2 datapads, and attached a long, thin tube Leia identified as a lightsaber to his belt. Why didn't they take that thing from you? She asked, pointing to it. They probably thought that they could stop me from escaping easily. Which, they could, which is why I didn't try to escape. As long as they weren't killing me, I didn't want to make them mad. That makes sense. Leia remarked, nodding. We'd better get going. The trio sprinted for the elevator, and was back in the Falcon and on course for Yavin IV within 10 minutes, thanks in part to the redirection of guards away from their path by Darth Sato. As they sped away from the Star Forge, Luke's eyes clouded over as he contacted his parents. Mother. Father. Yes, son. I am here. His father replied. We are on course to the rebel base. I'll tell you where it is when we get there. Thank you for doing this, my son. May the Force be with you. And with you. Goodbye, father. Farewell, Luke. As Luke broke contact, he felt the ship jump slightly as it entered hyperspace. He smirked slightly, happy that he could please his father. Once the rebellion was crushed, the Sith would rule the galaxy, and he could live with his mother and father for as long as he wanted. No one would make him go away, make him leave his family behind, and he would be happy. Oi. Luke. Wakey wakey, time to rise and shine. The pillow levitated of its own accord and hit Han dead on in the face. Luke. How the heck did you do that? Instantly, the GD Sith boy was awake. Oh Force, Han, I'm so sorry. It's just, I've been on edge for the last week, with the whole being captured by Sato and Revan thing. Yeah, okay, I get it. I just didn't know that you could throw things without so much touching them as not, Han finished lamely. Luke ducked his head. Some part of him disliked lying to his friend, well, sort of friend. Han had come to rescue him, after all. And it wasn't so much a lie as a truth budge. He had been on edge for a while, but that was more because of his father's tendency to jump out of random closets, alcoves, other dark places, and shout boo at the top of his lungs than for any other reason. Anyway, welcome to Yavin IV, home of the Rebel Alliance. All of them? Luke questioned, eyes bright with innocence. Or curiosity. Or dark evil, sidey thoughts. Well, we do have some satellite camps all over the galaxy, but most of them are here. Leia answered, coming in through the door. You ready? Yeah, let's go. I want to see everything. Leia laughed. The boy had come out of his ordeal without a scratch, something that had never happened before. Still, she couldn't help feeling that something was not quite right with the kid's openness and joyful expression as he scanned the Yavin IV base. The jubilant laugh at the X-Wing fighters, the amazement at the extent of the camp, it seemed odd, almost faked. But Luke would have no reason to fake joy, would he? Would he? All those legends, those wives' tales about the mysterious force that the Jedi had used, that the Sith Lords could use to break someone's mind in half, and put it back together completely differently. No, why was she thinking these things? It was Luke in front of her, Luke through and through, not some mystical magical voodoo mind puppet of the Dark Lords. Shaking her head, Leia put all her thoughts of the Force and magic and darkness away, and focused on the blonde youth, gleefully exploring the base in front of her. Luke, if you want, I can show you where you'll be sleeping. We've got a briefing at 0900 tomorrow to plan our attack on the Death Star, so you'll need some sleep. Attack on the Death Star? Luke asked, eyes open wide. You mean we're actually getting near that thing again? But, won't the Dark Lords be there? We'll talk about that tomorrow. Come on, the barracks are this way. Hey, where are your training rooms? Like a blaster practice range or something? Luke asked, hefting 2 of the training droids Obi-Wan had used to teach him the most basic of Force techniques. Techniques now rendered obsolete by the powers he had gained from only a few days of study at the side of his parents, but Leia and Han didn't know that. He would have to pretend to be a weak, wimpy light-sider, without any training beyond the Force sensitivity he'd had all his life. Oh, right. Over here. Leia led them over to a large, empty practice room equipped with holographic projectors. You can use this tomorrow morning if you want, but we really should get to the barracks soon. Yeah, you're right. I'm getting tired. Luke emphasized his point by yawning broadly, and was promptly shown to his cot in the barracks. Despite being surrounded by rowdy boys and men clamoring to know who he was, what he could fly, and how good he was, Luke managed to climb up onto his cot and sit cross-legged. Once the men in the barracks realized they couldn't get the new boy to talk, they left him alone to his meditation. Father, mother, son, Yavin IV. That's where the rebel base is. Sweet. Sato, behave yourself. Sorry love. They're planning on attacking the Death Star soon. Really soon. There's a briefing tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We will send the Infinite Fleet to the Death Star. Let the rebels see the true power of the dark side and tremble in terror before their conversion or death. Death? Really? Oh boy. Luke smiled slightly at his father's antics. Good night, father. Mother. Sleep well, Luke. Now go dream of sidey things, son. Yes, father. Luke lay down in his cot, staring at the Durasteel ceiling of the barracks. This place was so unlike his rooms in the Star Forge, with all their plush outfittings and enormous size. He found himself longing for that comfort, and for the comfort of having his enormously powerful parents so close by. Living with two beings so in tune with the Force was something that Luke had never experienced before. In the past, Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen had left him alone for hours when he was crying bitterly, unaware of the torment their nephew was in. With his parents, the second he began to feel the slightest bit of sadness about the loss of those whom he had grown up with, even though he now realized that he hated them for keeping him away from his family, one or the other appeared at his door with open arms and comforting words. He loved it. With a smile on his face, Luke turned over and fell asleep. Luke rolled out of bed at 0700 the next morning, landing on the floor with an audible thump. He groaned and moved to the footlocker at the bottom of the bed, pulling out the flight suit that had been assigned to him. Wistfully thinking of his robes at home, in the Star Forge, he trudged to the public showers. Under the spray of frigid, harsh water, he realized exactly how used he had gotten to the plush surrounding of his quarters with his parents. He dried off, pulled on his flight suit, and looped his lightsaber to his belt. A tiny, evil smile came across his normally angelic face, twisting it into a mockery of the light, as he fingered the blade, and considered the carnage that would overtake the rebel camp by the end of the day. He hefted the two small training droids, and went in search of the holo-room Leia had shown him yesterday. Droids, activate. Instantly, the two droids opened holes in their outer casings, and perhaps 10 smaller droids floated out of each, forming a ring round him. Each of the droids hummed to life, tiny shields and blasters warming up. Luke, too, came to life, a dark glint entering his eyes as that same evil smile slid over his face. He exhaled, thinking of the Star Forge and the life he had there, and then filled his lungs with the annoyance of spending even a day in these pathetic surroundings. He allowed the warmth of the Force to fill him, settling under his skin and seeping into his bones like a fizzing presence in his very blood. Begin. And with that simple command, the droids fired on him in unison. Tiny red bolts of blaster fire shot towards him, faster than the eye could follow. Luke's lightsaber snapped out, and, somehow, every single one of the bolts turned away. Throwing out one hand, he forced 3 of the droids to collide in a fiery explosion. He permitted himself a small thrill of victory, before turning that emotion into movement, bringing his saber directly through 2 more droids. 4 droid halves fell to the floor, smoking and sizzling. Now the remaining 15 droids began to move, spinning around Luke in circles, ovals, and spheres, creating a dizzying dance in midair. Luke channeled the Force blood out, wrapping his mind around the droids and crushing them. Recalling his most recent lessons, he sent the Force out and pushed it into physical existence, transforming it from an intangible energy into blue-white arcs of electricity. A few swings of his lightsaber, and the other droids became fiery meteors plummeting to the ground. Luke stood in the center of the room for a moment, panting for air and feeling the warm, comforting darkness envelop him. His features twisted into a mask of rage as he felt a light behind him, tiny as it was. It pushed at the darkness, calling to some fleck of itself in him, even as the Force blood in his body called to the dark, it sensed in the core of the light. He spun in place, ignoring the yin-yang that felt so natural, the light that seemed almost like his other half. His lightsaber headed straight for the source of the light snap, and froze at the look on Leia's face. Leia had come in about halfway through the boy's practice, just in time to see lightning come out of his body, and demolish half a dozen practice droids. Luke's blue lightsaber had arced through the air with a speed Leia couldn't follow, destroying all the remaining droids in the room with a strange cold efficiency that couldn't belong to the Luke she knew. Some instinct, something inside her that she couldn't place, called out to him, begging him to come back to her as the young, bright-eyed child she had known before even knowing him. But then he spun around, his lightsaber headed straight for her neck, and a look on her face of rage so strong it was almost how she felt after that Grand Moff idiot had destroyed Alderaan. He had frozen at the look of fear, of terror, that she could feel on her face, dropping the sizzling light sword and wrapping his arms around her. Surprisingly, she could feel water seeping into the cloth covering her shoulder, and started when she realized that the boy was crying. Leia, I'm scared. He wept into her shoulder, as she wrapped her arms around him. I can do these things that I shouldn't be able to, and I don't know how or why or what Revan and Sato wanted with me, and I'm scared. SHH, Luke, it's okay, Leia whispered, feeling the sobs rack his body, and knowing that whatever had possessed him was gone now, that the boy in her arms was the Luke she had met on the Death Star. But there was still something not quite right about this though. Leia forced the thoughts out of her head, and focused on Luke. After comforting him, Leia headed towards her barracks to prepare for the briefing. Walking out of the room, she couldn't have seen Luke adopt that strange evil smirk, or blot his false tears dry. And she couldn't have heard his whispered hook, line, and sinker, as he stared at her retreating back. Due to these plans taken by Princess Leia, Luke zoned out at the briefing, not really paying attention. Mom? Dad? Yes, Luke? Did you want to see this? If you would, is there death? Or pain? No, Dad. Sato. Pay attention. Sorry, love. Luke hid a smile at his wacky father. Who would have thought the powerful Dark Lord of the Sith had such a strange sense of humor? Leia was worried. Luke was acting very strange, and almost seemed different. Even after the incident in the Holo Room, she didn't really believe it, but it was almost like something in his personality had shifted. It was troubling to say the least, but she wasn't convinced. Han, on the other hand, well, maybe it was time for a little perspective. Han. He finally turned to look. He saw Leia sprinting after him. Force, are you deaf? She panted. He smirked. Maybe. She smacked him upside the head. Ow. What was that for? He complained. Anyway, have you noticed something different about Luke? He's been acting sort of strange lately. Han nodded in agreement. Leia turned as someone called her name. Luke? Sleep well? She asked. Luke nodded. Best sleep I've had in days. He smiled crookedly. So what's on the agenda for the day? Well, we were going to test fly the X-Wings, Mr. Fighter Pilot, Leia commented, nodding at his uniform. Luke laughed easily. You know, these things are really itchy, Luke remarked, holding the collar of the suit as far away from his neck as he could. Leia giggled at the scrunched-up look on his face, and was relieved when he grinned back. All traces of his little episode earlier that day were gone, she noted, and he was back to his happy-go-lucky and somehow slightly off personality. Well, come on. Those X-Wings aren't going to fly themselves, right? Luke sprinted towards the hangar, joining up with the crowd of pilots already congregating around the battered fighter ships. Now, who wants to test fly one first? The instructor was asking the group. Luke's hand shot up, despite not knowing a thing about flying a fighter. You. Since you seem so enthusiastic, even though you just got here and missed all of orientation, why don't you give it a shot? Luke was over to the X-Wing and clambering into the cockpit before the man was finished. He pulled on the airtight helmet, sealed the cockpit, and stared at the rows of switches, buttons, and other miscellaneously confusing things lining the walls. Any time in the next few hours would be nice, pilot. The instructor yelled, looking livid. Luke knew in that instant that he was meant to fail, to become a laughingstock, the example of how not to fly an X-Wing. I'll show you, was his whispered responses. For the second time today, he called to the Force. Closing his eyes, he fed his anger at the pretentious peasant who dared to try to make a fool of his betters, and felt it give him the information he needed in return. He input the correct sequence within seconds, barely thinking about it, powering up the fighter ship like an old pro, and flying straight out of the hangar. Once in the air, he understood his father's love of machines perfectly. The absolute freedom, the complete power over everything, it was intoxicating. Remembering the rebel on the ground, the one who expected him to fail, Luke brought the ship that was now an extension of his body, through corkscrews, loops, and a dizzying series of aeronautical maneuvers that would have made his dad proud. Smugly, he brought the ship in for a landing, laughing at the look on the face of the man who had been so certain of his inaptitude mere minutes before. He swung his legs out of the cockpit and dropped the 10 or so feet to the ground easily. He met Leia's eyes with an easy smile and a wink, before turning to the instructor. You? Yes, sir. The instructor swallowed. You're dismissed. Leave. Now. Luke's face tightened. He was easily the best pilot here, and this pathetic rebel knew it. He was jealous. Luke could feel the comforting anger fizzing up again, the desire to crush the man's skull, and make him beg for mercy from his superior, and the person who was infinitely better than him simply by birthright. Yes, sir. He fed the urges to the darkness, letting it grow stronger within him, spun on his heel, and stalked away. Luke, father. When will you be here? Your mother and I are en route to Yavin, and should arrive in about 10 hours. Alright. I miss you. And I, your son. As well as Revan chimed in. We ran after Luke as he stalked out of the hangar. Luke. He turned to face her, and something flickered across his face. I just wanted. She was cut off as a runner skidded to a stop beside her. Princess Leia. Mon Mothma asks that you meet her in the conference room ASAP. It's super important. He sprinted away, on more errands. Leia sent an apologetic glance at the angry Luke. I'm sorry, Luke. I'll talk to you after I talk to Mothma. Something made her reach out and give him a quick hug before walking away. Leia. We've just received word that our security was breached, and therefore we need to send everyone to Hoth. The Dark Lords will soon know where we are. Our transports are in place, and everyone is loading. We need someone to stay behind to help supervise the vanguard in erasing all evidence. Not you. You're too valuable. Mothma poured out in a rush. Leia blinked. Luke and Han. I trust them with my life. She replied after a moment. Mothma nodded and left. Leia sank back into her chair. Who would betray them? Luke was excited. His first mission with his parents. Leia had left him and Han in charge, and although the entire rebel force wasn't there, a good 20 still was. Han placed a large hand on his shoulder. Kid, relax. I know it's your first time in charge, but his mouth dropped open as he pointed a shaking finger at the sky. The Dark Lords. Luke smirked. Almost instantly, turrets from all over the rebel camp came to life, firing on the dozen-odd star destroyers descending from the clouds. Laser beams from the ground weapons disintegrated before even touching the massive ships, bouncing off the shields. Strangely enough, the ships didn't fire in return. Why, exactly, this was answered when first one, then another, then every rebel turret self-destructed. In silence, the Rebel Alliance watched as, one by one, every weapon in their camp was destroyed. Blasters, turbine cannons, even droids with tiny lasers to help with repairs, every single offensive weapon crumbled into its base components. Unarmed and defenseless, they had no choice but to wait for what was coming next. The largest ship, the one in front, the Scourge of the Galaxy, the flagship of the Imperial fleet and the vessel of both Darth Revan and Darth Sato, gently landed in the center of the rebel encampment. Slowly, the massive docking ramp lowered from the bulk of the Star Destroyer, thudding gently as it hit the ground. Row after row of white-clad stormtroopers marched out of the battleship, tens and hundreds and thousands of them. Rank and file they stood, in squadrons of 100, forming a pathway for the next two figures. Clad in black and cut out against the light from the ship, the Empress and her lord stalked no. They swaggered down the ramp, Revan in front and Sato a few feet behind and to her right side. As soon as their feet hit the ground, the army of stormtroopers shifted their blaster rifles from the ground to their left shoulders, then to their right, before resting them on their right shoulders, in perfect military salute fashion. The lords continued to stalk forward, until they were in front of the entire army, staring down their noses at the assembled Rebel Alliance. Suddenly, a wave of some utterly invisible power swept out of Revan, forcing nearly every member of the Alliance to their knees, bowing deeply to their new masters. Nearly every member, of course, because there was one who still stood tall, unbent by the dark wave flowing around him. One who let the darkness into his soul, filling it up with intoxicating power and washing over him to clean all traces of light from his skin. Dressed once more in his dark robes, with his father's lightsaber hanging at his side and his mother's assurance like a cloak around him, the only person in the Alliance still on his feet, looked every inch the Prince of the Empire. Staring up at the tall, dark shaft against the light, Han could only whisper Luke's name in confusion, as understanding pricked at the edge of his consciousness. Luke strode forward confidently, stepping over bodies huddled against the wave of energy still pounding like waves on a beach. When he reached his parents, his left leg slid out, and he dropped to one knee respectfully. Mother. Father. These quiet statements, heard by everyone in the Alliance due to Luke's strong voice and his parents' subtle amplification through the Force, sent a ripple of fear into the heart of every being on the battlefield. Son, Revan greeted, lifting him to his feet before planting a kiss on each of his cheeks. Sato, on the other hand, was a little more enthusiastic, shouting his son's name to the high heavens, and sweeping him up in a flurry of black-clothed arms. Used to their superiors' strangely childlike antics, the stormtroopers did nothing. Dad, put me down. Luke cried warmly, beating against his father's back. After his father had complied, he tugged at the dark fabric covering his torso, straightening it out, before spinning to face the rest of the Alliance. Princess Leia is gone, to the Alpha side on Hoth. Almost 20% of the rebels are still here, though. Also, I've a present for you. He lifted his right hand, levitating Han's prostrate body through the air, laying him down at his parents' feet. The princess has feelings for him. I thought, maybe we could use him. His bright blue eyes opened wide, seeking assurance. Excellent plan, my son, Revan commented calmly. Would you like to stay to watch? I find this part to be a bit savage for my tastes. Sato grinned, and unclipped his lightsaber from his belt. Fun. I'll stay, if you don't mind. I've been acting for a few hours too long, I want to show them what I can do. Ice blue eyes bored into the white-brown ones of the flight instructor who had so foolishly annoyed him, promising pain and fire and death. As you wish, Revan spun on her heel and stalked up the ramp, pulling Han along behind her with 2 fingers in her mind. At the top of the ramp, she glanced down, eyes flickering over the mass of bodies crouched on the ground, the army of soldiers in white, and the twin Sith Lords, fair hair flapping in the breeze. Destroyed them. Sato's grin grew even whiter as a blade of red light extended from the end of his hilt, glowing sinisterly. Fun, 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 he remarked again. Then suddenly he was a whirl of black cloth and red lightsaber and tan skin, chopping down everything that breathed that got in his way as he gave himself over fully to his senses. The Alliance members, freed from the force lock the instant Sato's blade had sliced through the first of them, screamed and ran for their miserable little lives. They were cut down by blaster fire from the stormtroopers. Observing wasn't really doing much good for the young Dark Lord in training, so set Sith leapt to join the frenzy. lightsaber swinging wildly and cackling madly. He was the spitting image of his more childlike, albeit more powerful, father. The duo at the top of the ramp pivoted to face the carnage, one with a slight smirk, as she watched a pained expression on the other's face. Han couldn't believe it. Luke was so innocent, so naive, so young. The bright bubbly kid he had met on Tatooine had been completely replaced by a savage, wild animal, intent on annihilation of everything that stood in his path. It hit Han with full force that Luke was the son of the two most powerful forces of evil the galaxy had ever known, that his was Luke his friend. He'd outflown Imperial starships as Luke trained with the old geezer, watched the kid fry his arms up with blaster bolts from that little droid, outsmarted stormtroopers, rescued the princess and abandoned Luke to become this monster as he ran for his own skin. His eyesight grew blurry as tears clouded his vision, silent tears running down his face, his body still unmoved. It hurts, doesn't it? Han's head turned towards the source of the soft voice, directly to his left. Betrayal. I know how it feels to be betrayed by someone you thought you knew. And I know how it feels to betray someone you love. Revan's eyes were misty as she looked back into the past, back to her childhood and her youth. It echoes inside of you, ripping new holes just when you thought you'd finally healed. She met his eyes. And it doesn't get better with time. The only thing that makes it go away, the only thing that makes it stop, is power. Think on that, Han Solo, when you are being tortured, and remember that all you have to do to make it stop is rejoin your friend. She turned and swept up the ramp, Han's body following like a trained cat-hound, the noise of the carnage echoing behind them, and the bright, vibrant laughter of a boy becoming the darker, more sinister laughter of a Sith. Han's screams echoed down the corridors. Sato's handsome face was twisted into a snarl, illuminated by the flashes of force lightning spewing from his hands. Han's face was a mask of pain, an outwardly portrayal of the struggle within. Please Luke, make it stop, he begged. Luke sniffed, and loosed his own blast of lightning. Enough, my son. Luke and his father spun on their heels simultaneously, almost bound to Revan as she entered. Luke, Sato, you can leave. I will deal with this rebel myself. Luke's face twisted in disappointment. But Sato's hand on his shoulder cut him off. Come on, Luke. Let's go do something fun while Rev here does the grunt work. Flashing a smile at his lover's answering frown, Sato steered his son from the room. Revan shook her head, lamenting over the antics of her husband and consort, before turning back to Han. Good morning, rebel. Why, as always, her presence, coupled with the dominate mind she channeled through her mask and her bright yellow eyes, reduced him to a gibbering wreck. Just hold still, Han. I promise you, this won't hurt too much. After the first couple of hours, that is. One long, delicate hand came up to the pitch-black mask, removing it with care. The eyes that were revealed glowed with an inhuman light, penetrating into his foggy mind and making coherent thought impossible. The Sith slowly sauntered over to where he was chained against the wall, bringing 2 fingers to bear on each of his temples. As those ghostly sulfur-colored eyes bored into his head, whispered, disjointed thoughts began to run through his mind. Serve, protect, serve, obey, serve, kill, serve. Han screamed as the dark side forced a new personality into him, as his old self was overwritten by different programming, and as he slowly forgot everything that made him him. Leia sank back in her chair, pale. Almost a fifth of the Alliance, crushed in less than a day. And neither Han's nor Luke's bodies were among them. Indeed not. What the? Please, princess, do not speak. I can hear you without such means. Who? When I was alive, I was known as Obi-Wan Kenobi, Master of the Jedi Order. Kenobi, you're the one who died on the Death Star. Indeed. But how are you talking to me, if you're dead? One is capable of many things, through the Force. Why are you talking to me? Because, princess, as you yourself put it, you are my only hope. Luke Skywalker has fallen to the darkness. What? No, that can't be right. He wouldn't. Look within yourself. You have seen it. Maybe. I mean, he wasn't quite himself, but that doesn't mean that he fell to the darkness, or whatever you said. You know, princess. All you must do is let yourself see. Well, even if I did believe you, what could I do about it? Go to the Dagobah system. There, you will find a Jedi Master who will teach you the ways of the Force. You are our only hope, Leia Organa. Please, you must help us. Dagobah. Nobody in their right minds would live there. Which makes it the perfect place to hide, does it not? But I can't. I've got to help out the Alliance. I mean, we lost almost 1/5, I know. But please, princess, imagine a galaxy ruled by those monsters. They're heartless, as you very well know. They would destroy the entirety of the galaxy in their quest for power, if they were not checked. Fine. I'll do it. Thank you. Remember, you seek a Jedi Master, a great warrior, who will teach you the ways of the Force. Yeah, I got it. Wait, how did they turn Luke evil in that short of a time frame? I mean, he was only with them for about 5 days. They fed him a mixture of lies and truth, with just enough truth thrown in to disguise the lies. They made him doubt himself, and you, and even me. And then, when he was unstable enough, they told him something that would push him over the edge and drive him into the dark. What was it? There was silence from the other end of the line. And then, I can't tell you that right now. Simply trust in me. If I reveal to you the truth, your heart would break. How do you expect me to do that, if I know that you are keeping things from me? Fare thee well, I must leave. Remember, Princess. Dagobah. GD Master. Force. Wait. Answer me. Goodbye, Princess. Sitspit. Leia punched her desk in anger. Crazy old man. Still her mind made up, she requested a small ship for her journey. If there was any way to save Luke and Han, she was going to do everything in her power to find it. Leia watched as R2's words as they were translated and screamed on the computer scope. Yes, that's it. Dagobah. Leia called to the little droid through the comlink. No, I'm not going to change my mind about this. She started to get a little nervous. I'm not picking up any cities or technology. Massive life form readings, though. There's something alive down there, she chuckled as R2 beeped. Yes, I'm sure it's perfectly safe for droids. Leia frantically worked the controls of the small craft, flying blind in the clouds. I know. All the scopes are dead. I can't see a thing. Just hang on, I'm going to start the landing cycle, she called to R2. A loud crack echoed, and Leia pulled the switch for her canopy. She opened up the cockpit and slowly made her way down the nose. At the end, she leapt off and scrambled up onto the shore. R2. The little droid beeped, and his periscope made its way towards shore. Then, with a loud scream, he was swallowed up by a large shape. R2. A moment later, the little droid was catapulted up on shore. Leia began to clean the little droid. If you're saying coming here was a bad idea, I'm beginning to agree with you. Oh, R2, what are we doing here? It's like something out of a dream, or, I don't know. Maybe I'm just going crazy, she sighed. Leia pulled an equipment box into the clearing she had found. Igniting a little furnace, she warmed her hands over it. It's so spooky here, she murmured, as if to herself. Now all I have to do is find this Yoda if he even exists. She peered into the jungle. Still, there's something familiar about this place. I feel like I don't know. Feel like what? A new voice startled Leia, and she jumped. Snatching her blaster, she trained it on the little 2-foot-tall creature. Like we're being watched. She snarled. Away, put your weapon. I mean you no harm. After some hesitation, Leia complied, although she really didn't know why. I am wondering, why are you here? The creature asked. I'm looking for someone. She replied. Looking. Found someone, you have, I would say. The creature laughed. Help you I can. Yes, I don't think so. I'm looking for a great warrior. Leia replied, not happy with the conversation. Ah, a great warrior. The creature laughed and shook his head. Wars not make one great. The thing began to poke around Leia's gear. Hey, put that down, that's my dinner. She protested. He spited out the bite he'd taken. How you get so big, eating food of this kind? The creature looked disgusted. He continued to poke around. After a moment, he stumbled upon a tiny power lamp. Hey, you could have broken this. Don't do that. Oh, you're making a mess. Hey, give me that. Mine. Or I will help you not. He protested. I don't want your help. I want my lamp back. I'll need it to get out of this slimy mud hole. Mud hole. Slimy. My home this is. Fine. I need the help anyway. Now will you move along, little fella? We've got a lot of work to do. Leia finally said. No. Stay and help you, I will. Find your friend. He laughed. I'm not looking for a friend. I'm looking for a GD Master, Leia revealed. Who? GD Master. Yoda. You seek Yoda. Take you to him, I will. Yes. But now, we must eat. Come. Good food. Come. He scurried away. Leia sighed and followed reluctantly. R2, protesting being left behind, wheeled after them. The Dark Lord, Darth Sato, was alone in his chamber. A strange sound entered the room, and a light began to play across Sato's curls. Revan strode into the room. Her long full robe swished as she walked, and the mask she wore hid her face. Sighing, she sank into a chair next to Sato. She slipped the mask off her face, and set it on the table. What is thy bidding, my master? Sato asked in his low voice, only half joking. Revan looked stressed, and a little worn out. There is a great disturbance in the Force, she replied, eyes closed. I have felt it. Sato replied coolly. We have a new enemy, Leia Organa. Yes, love. She could destroy us. She's just a girl. Obi-Wan can no longer help her. The Force is strong with her. The daughter of Skywalker must not become a GD. If she could be turned, she would become a powerful ally. She must join us. Our family must be whole again. Revan sighed, and slipped over to sit on Sato's lap. Ani, what if she rejects us? What if she hates us? We are so close to being whole. Sato stroked her hair gently. She will join us, love. I promise. Yoda supervised his new apprentice with weary eyes. The information that the male Skywalker had joined his parents was a severe blow to the cause of the light, one that had made the aged GD Master real. It explained why the female twin had come to him instead of the male, as per Obi-Wan's plan, but still, it was unexpected. He had to admit, though, the girl had proved far more adept with the Force than he could have hoped. Due to her long years as a politician, she was able to suppress emotions that would have been difficult for a hot-blooded young male. Already, with only 6 days formal training, the child was at the rank of most Padawans when they went to train with their GD master. Concentrate, you must, Yoda told her sternly, watching her struggle to levitate 5 of the large boulders around his home simultaneously. Your mind, you must clear. Leave behind, you must, all thoughts of your friends. Leia's face grew troubled at the mention of her friends. Hand lick. She surrendered those mixed emotions to the warm light inside her, and the boulders steadied. In out. Disjointed images flashed behind her eyelids, coming out of the light and revealing themselves to her for only a brief moment. What she saw she could not make sense of, and she pushed harder to try to glimpse more. She saw flashes of herself glaring at someone else over the blue blade of a lightsaber, saw that other, darker figure ignite a blood-red one. The figure was shrouded in darkness, even with the hellish red light that should have revealed his face. Even though it was only a vision, she could taste the darkness that flowed off of the man in waves, pushing and pulling and poking at her light, trying to find a way to break in. The man attacked her with his crimson blade, and she defended with her own blue one. Their battle rose to a fever pitch, the dark man attacking, she defending, beautifully and perfectly choreographed. Abruptly, Leia's back hit a wall, and she realized with shock that what she had taken to be the man fighting with all he had, certainly she was going full out, had only been a ruse to get her trapped like thus. She could feel the dark around the man stir with bloodlust as he redoubled his attack, his blade flicking in and out, before she even had a chance to block it. Interestingly, his strikes never came near her, as though he was afraid to hurt her. Leia made a choice. If he really was afraid to hurt her, then she would be fine. If not, then she switched off her blade. The attack stopped instantly, and the other's saber retracted into his hilt as he stood up from the lethal and leaning crouch he had been in. The position of his hut indicated that he was looking at her, but all she could see were sulfur-colored eyes. Leia, you don't have to do this. Leia started. This creature, human, Sith, whatever he was, knew her name. How was that possible? And his voice. It was soothing, deep, and comforting, promising peace and rest for eternity if only she would give in. Just give in, and she could sleep forever. Do you really want to spend the rest of your life fighting for a lost cause? The GD will use you, Leia, make you give up everything you ever wanted or loved for an order that has long been extinct. Leia could feel her bones growing weary, her body becoming more tired, as the darkness slipped around her and slowly worked its tendrils through her aura, stroking her skin slowly. Just give in to it, Leia, join me, Leia. Leia's eyes shot open. In his excitement, the dark man had come closer, and she could see the face under the hood. Luke's features were unmistakable, though his skin seemed paler, and his eyes glowed that fiendish yellow. Never, she shouted. When she realized just how close she had come to giving in to the darkness, she almost threw up, and that emotion hurled her violently out of the vision that was not a vision. The boulders thudded to the wet earth as she sat on the ground, panting at the nearness of that future. Cloud City, she murmured, not noticing Yoda's small body next to hers. Her sight was flickering between the clearing on Dagobah and the friend enemy waiting for her at the place she knew she had to go. Rising to her feet, she stalked off towards the X-Wing, not even aware of the GD Master's protests in broken basic. The dark had her in its lure now, Yoda realized, and until she met with the one who had sent her the vision, she would never rest. An incredibly powerful form of mind control, this was, and fully dark. The one who had sent this to her had to be one or both of the Dark Lords, and they wanted their child back. And they would stop at nothing to get her. And that is why you will comply with our plan. Comprehend? The younger Sith Lord sneered. Lando Calrissian nodded vehemently. Yes, Lord Bane. Sato stood at his son's side, and his hand rested on the smaller man's shoulder. He stifled a chuckle as he remembered when Revan had told him the Sith Lord name she intended to bestow upon Luke. Revan rolled over to face Sato in their bed. I was thinking. It's almost time for Luke to be given a Sith name, isn't it? Sato nodded. Did you have a particular name in mind? He asked, curious. Darth Bane. Sato propped himself up on one elbow. Now, no offense, Rev, but how do you know Darth Bane? He was way after your time. Revan sat up, and the sheep huddled at her waist. Her hands were on her hips. Sato held in a snicker. She looked so tough and fierce, yet she was completely naked. Of course, he would make a comment to his beautiful lover, but he was curious as to how she'd heard of Bane. I'm Darth Revan. I know everything. He snickered. Oh, you. She sent a small bolt of force lightning at him. Now, Rev. You do that, and we may not finish this conversation. Revan stuck out her tongue. Shut up. There will be plenty of time for that later. She scoffed. Anyway, I heard about him through the Forge when I questioned it about former Dark Lords. I went and looked him up. I find him fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Would you say it's the most fascinating thing in the room? Sato laughed. Rev glared at him. You're impossible. Bane wasn't impossible. She stood up and padded into the bathroom, giving Sato an extremely nice picture of her backside. He groaned. When she returned, he rolled on top of her. Now, Ani. What has the last day or two taught you? With a faint growl, Sato gestured in the direction of the door. It locked with a faint click. Now, where were we? 4 armor-suited stormtroopers stand at the ready in the large chamber, which was filled with pipes and chemical tanks. In the middle of the room was a round pit housing a hydraulic platform. Sato, Bane, and Lando stood near the platform. This facility is crude, but it should be adequate to freeze Organa for her journey to the Empress, Bane remarked. A stormtrooper approached slowly, wary of the two Dark Lords. Millards, ship approaching, X-Wing class. Good. Monitor Organa and allow her to land. The trooper bowed and rushed to comply with the Dark Lord's directions. Leia cautiously made her way through the hallways, keeping an eye out for anyone and anything. She ran into an anteroom and stopped to get her bearings. Behind Leia, R2 scooted down the corridor toward the anteroom when suddenly a giant metal door slammed down, which cut off the GD's exit. Several more doors clanged shut, and the sound echoed through the chamber. R2 stood with his nose pressed against the giant metal door. He whistled a long sigh of relief and, a little dazed, wandered off in the other direction. Leia cautiously walked forward among hissing pipes and steam. She saw an opening above her, and she stopped to look up. As she did, the platform she stood on began to move. Leia rose into the chamber, borne by the platform. The room was deathly quiet. Very little steam escaped the pipes, and no one else seemed to be in the large room. Wearily, Leia walked toward the stairway. Steam began to build up in the chamber. Looking up through the steam, Leia saw a dark figure standing on a walkway above her. Leia holstered her gun and moved slowly up the stairs to face Luke, whom she did not realize was now Darth Bane. She felt confident, eager to engage her enemy. The Force is with you, dearest Leia. But you are not a GD yet. Luke's voice echoed off the walls. Leia ignited her sword in answer. Don't call me dearest anything, you monster. Leia lunged, but Bane repelled the blow. Again Leia attacked, and the swords of the two combatants clashed in battle. Leia and Bane were locked in combat on the platform overlooking the chamber. Their swords clashed, and the platform swayed. Leia aggressively drove Bane back, forcing Bane to use defensive tactics. Bane made two quick moves, picking Leia's sword out of her hand and sending it flying. Another lightning move at Leia's feet forced the youth to jump back to protect herself. Losing her balance, Leia rolled down the stairs to the circular carbon freezing platform. There she sprawled on the floor, surprised and shaking. Just in time she looked up to see Bane, like a giant blackbird, flying right at her. Leia rolled away as Bane landed. Crouching, she kept her gaze steady on her enemy. Behind her, the hydraulic elevator cover opened noiselessly. All the while, Leia was slowly and cautiously moving back, away from the new Dark Lord. Suddenly, Bane attacked so forcefully that Leia lost her balance and fell back into the opening. There was a rumble, and in an instant freezing steam rose to obscure Bane's vision. Bane turned aside and deactivated his sword. All too easy. Perhaps you are not as strong as our mother thought, Bane murmured. Liquid metal began to pour into the pit. A moment later, a huge mechanical tong lifted the steaming metal-encased princess out of the vat and stood her on the platform. Some Ugnaughts rushed over and pushed the block over onto the platform. They slid the coffin-like structure to the block and lifted the metal block, placing it inside. They then attached an electronic box onto the structure and stepped away. Bane knelt and adjusted some knobs, measuring the heat. He shook his head in relief. He gestured to a pair of stormtroopers, who, in awe of their lord's fighting prowess, ran to put the princess on an anti-grav unit. They pushed it in front of them, with the young Dark Lord striding behind them. They were halfway to the ship when a smoke grenade rolled to a stop at their feet. A moment later, when the smoke cleared, the anti-grav unit was gone. Fett Bane roared, Boba Fett being the bounty hunter currently chasing a bounty placed on Leia by some remote Alderaanian protest group. He would pay. Oh, he would pay. Master Jabba the Hutt, I present to you Leia, Princess of Alderaan. You have done as well as usual, Fett. Congratulations, the Hutt boomed through his translator droid. Your feat, I expect, will be the same as always. Boba Fett bowed, expecting nothing less, and backed away, letting the Hutt's attendants take care of the not GD. They quickly set about unfreezing the female, and, once she was out of the stone, dragged her in front of their master. Leia, shaking with dread and cold, was afraid that she had been brought to the Dark Lords. She huddled in on herself, too scared to do anything else. So this is the famous Princess of Alderaan, the Hutt laughed. At the sound of his raspy dialect, Leia's head shot up, relief coursing through her. Wherever she was, the voice speaking wasn't the deep baritone of Sato, or the velvet tones of Darth Revan. The next words out of the Hutt's mouth, however, replaced her hopes with coldness again. She will make a fine slave. Take her to be fitted. No? Leia called out. This wasn't how it was supposed to happen. She reached out to the Force, trembling, but her inability to calm her emotions made a connection impossible. Han. She called, sending her plea out through the universe, a desperate bid for help. Luke, Leia, Han, yes again. The voice was cold, and her vision blurred even further as knowledge gripped her. Luke, very good. Don't worry, Leia. I'm coming for you. No, I won't hurt you, Leia. The voice was protective, furiously hot at the very thought. Don't be afraid, Sith. She told the voice in her head with all the hatred she could muster. Yes, was the reply. She was silent, realizing that she would get nowhere. The presence at the back of her mind was silent as well, even as she was stripped of her clothes and fitted with the second most revealing garment she had ever worn. Her sight returning, she was hauled bodily back before her new master. Ah, yes, a fine specimen indeed, Jabba crooned. Bring my slave up here. The servants complied with their filthy employer's demands, smuggling her up and chaining her to his side. You won't get away with this, Jabba. Slavery is illegal in the Republic. Jabba laughed, a horrible, deep-throated noise. The Republic no longer exists, little worm. Suddenly, one of the view screens lit up, showing the face of a humanoid alien. Master, there is a human here to see you, the being spoke, and Leia instantly knew that she was in trouble. Send him in, Jabba commanded, shutting off the view screen. Perhaps we shall see what this human wants before we slaughter him, now. The door slid open soundlessly, admitting an all too familiar man shrouded in dark cloth and emanating evil. Leia's limited senses were swamped by his presence, and she realized with a start that the Sith had been holding back in their fight the entire time. Jabba the Hutt, I bring greetings from Her Imperial Highness, Empress Revan, and His Imperial Lordship, Dark Lord Sato, Bane said in a calm voice. Leia started. Never in 100 years would she have thought that someone could turn the bright rambunctious kid she knew into a diplomat. The Empress bids me to tell you that you have taken something that belongs to her, and she will not tolerate it. You are to hand to me the person of Leia Organa, Princess of Alderaan, and in return I am to spare your life and the lives of your court. Failure to do so will result in your death. Jabba laughed menacingly. I think it is you, human, who will die. He exclaimed, motioning to a small furry creature to the side of his throne. Luke Bane tumbled downwards into the pit that opened beneath his feet, somehow landing in a crouch. Release the rancor. At the side of the pit, an iron door rumbled upward and a giant fanged rancor emerged. The guard ran to the side of the pit and tried futilely to scramble to the top. The hideous beast closed in on him. The rancor moved past Bane, and as the guard continued to scramble, the rancor picked him up and popped him into his slavering jaws. A few screams later, and the guard was swallowed with a gulp. The audience cheered and laughed at the guard's fate. The monster turned and started for Bane. The young Sith dashed away just ahead of the monster, swiped at him, and picked up the long arm bone of an earlier victim. The monster grabbed Bane and brought him up to his salivating mouth. At the last moment, Bane wedged the bone in the monster's mouth and was dropped to the floor. The monster bellowed in rage and flailed about, hitting the side of the pit, and caused an avalanche. The monster crushed the bone in its jaws and saw Bane, who had squeezed into a crevice in the pit wall. Bane looked past the monster to the holding cave beyond. On the far side of the holding cave was a utility door if only he can get to it. The rancor spotted Bane and reached into the crevice for him. Bane grabbed a large rock and raised it, smashing it down on the rancor's finger. The rancor let out a loud howl as Bane made a run for the holding cave. He reached the door and pushed the button to open it. When he succeeded, he saw a heavy barred gate between him and safety. Beyond the gate, two guards looked up from their dinner. Bane turned to see the monster heading for him, and pulled with all his might on the gate. The guards moved to the gate and started poking at the young Sith with spears, laughing. Bane crouched against the wall as the monster started to reach for him. Suddenly he noticed a main door control panel halfway up the wall. As the rancor moved in for the kill, Bane picked up a skull from the cave floor and hurled it at the panel. The giant overhead door came crashing down on the beast's head, squashing it like a sledgehammer on an egg. A startled gasp was heard from the stunned court. Heads looked to Jabba, who actually turned red with anger. Leia couldn't suppress her joy, glad even though Luke was a Sith now, that he was safe. Jabba uttered a harsh command to his guards, and they hurried off. A snarl on his face, Bane leapt out of the pit. He advanced on Jabba, lightsaber in hand. He'd been testing himself against the rancor, but there was no need with this fat, slobbering mess of a being. Give me the princess, Hutt. Now, he snarled. And perhaps I shall spare your life. The Hutt seemed to swell with rage. He barked a command in Huttese, and a squad of Gamorreans rushed at the young Dark Lord. Without even turning around, Bane pushed out with a hand, and it tumbled backwards into the wall. He loosed a jet of lightning at them, and then turned back to Jabba. You've just forfeited your life, Hutt. Jabba's eyes widened, and he began to make a horrible sucking noise, the sound one made when one's throat was being crushed. Then, the Hutt's eyes rolled back in his head, and the chain holding Leia tumbled from his grasp. Bane leapt into action. Lightsaber blazing, a few moments later the room lay silent, save for the Twi'lek gasping for breath. Help me, have mercy, he ground out. Bane bent over him, and peered into his eyes. Those who ask for mercy are too weak to receive it. And with that, the Sith crushed the man's skull into the floor. He crossed the remaining few steps to Leia's side silently, observing his sister with an emotionless expression, though inside he was boiling. How dared that lump of flesh lay even one hand on his sister? What gave the dearly deceased Hutt the thought that he had the right to challenge Bane? The Sith crushed his sister's chains in one hand. The boiling rage in his soul calmed slightly as he helped the shell-shocked princess to her feet. We're running late, he told her absently, casting out his senses for any trace of life in the palace. All he found were prisoners and guards, sniveling from the dark presence of the palace. What do you mean, we're running late? And why would you even think that I would follow you? And, for that matter, shut up, Leia, Bane said wearily. I'm not in the mood to hear your self-righteous prattle right now, so just be quiet and let me do my work. You're not going to kill any more people. I won't let you. Bane grinned at her, a flash of the Luke she knew shining through, before it was gone. You're welcome to try and stop me. His eyes flickered shut, and she was swamped with dark energy as his senses probed again. They slid over her, dismissing her light with ease, moving on to the next source of life force. It was that easy dismissal of her that did it, she thought, the way he seemed to consider her no threat at all, easily and carelessly, like dismissing a servant. She snapped. All the anger and frustration she pent up during her hours, was it really only hours? The service to Jabba the Hutt coming out in full fury and slicing through the light, cutting into his darkness with her own. There was one major difference between the dark in her and the dark in him, though. The strength of an untrained, semi-disciplined pseudo-GD versus the strength of a full Sith Lord in all his power is laughable at best, pathetic at worst, though the shock of this new power did force Bane back a step or two. As soon as he recovered, though, he took hold of that dark energy and directed it, forcing her to watch as he opened one of the innocent prisoners' heads, and poured their combined powers into it, exploding veins and frying cells instantly. Bane laughed, Lee cried, and the prisoner died screaming. Do you see how easy it is? He asked her jubilantly. Do you understand? We have power, Leia, power that has been granted only to us, only to those who can use it. He forced her to kill another, then another, then another, until the part of her that was Revan and Sato's daughter was laughing in ecstasy. Use it. He cut them both off from the Force, leaving her on the ground, tears running down her cheeks and horror on her face, as he laughed, flushed with the power the dark side bestowed. You can feel it, Leia, I know you can. Embrace it. Never. She spat out, shaking with rage and sorrow and desire. I'm not like you, so don't even think of comparing us, you filthy Sith. Bane snapped for a moment, pushing her shoulders sharply against the wall, and pinning her there. You and I are alike, Leia. Two halves of the same whole. You felt it as much as I did, I know you did. We're exactly the same. He stared into her eyes darkly, calculating, contemplating, before releasing her and turning away. The Empress will be proud to know that I have succeeded. Come on, we're running late. With that, he pivoted on his heel. Leia followed him, knowing that she had no other choice and emphatically telling herself that that was why she was walking after him, and not because his words had struck a note of truth in her soul, not because some part of her, the part that she squashed mercilessly, had rejoiced in the slaughter of innocents, and the use of the darkness waiting inside her. The Empress and her consort sat quietly on a couch, surveying their fleet. Revan was tucked under Sato's arm, and snuggled close to his warmth. He placed a gentle kiss on the top of his beloved's head. Revan stiffened, and sat up abruptly. Love? Sato asked quietly. A look of pure joy flooded across her face. Our daughters come home. Sato's face filled with equal joy. They hurried from their rooms to the bridge. Leia hesitantly followed Luke, Bane, whoever he was, deeper into the Star Forge. Unable to help herself, Leia glanced everywhere with awe. Welcome, daughter of darkness. Ah. Leia screeched. Do not be afraid. Who are you? Bane spun to face her. Who are you talking to? He demanded. I don't know. Something in my head called me daughter of darkness. Bane glanced up, an expression of annoyance on his face. So you'll talk to her as soon as she appears, but not me. Thanks a lot. Rumble, you are not. Rumble, oh shut up. Who would have thought you had a sense of humor? You're worse than Dad. Rumble, Leia was a little scared now. Who was he talking to? Did the dark side create illusions and make you go crazy as well? He speaks to me. I am the Star Forge. And you are the daughter of the Lady and Lord of Darkness. You are wrong. I am no dark child. The Forge chuckled. As you wish. Leia did not want to think about that. Her parents were dead, killed by Revan and Sato and their dang at Death Star. Revan settled into her chair on the dais, and Sato stood near the huge window. Swish, the door slid open, revealing Bane and Organa. Bane rushed forward, and his parents leaped to embrace him. Sato pounded him soundly on the back. How have you been, son? You doing okay? He asked. Revan was softer. I miss you, son. She pressed a kiss to his forehead. She whispered something in his ear that Leia did not quite catch, and a broad grin spread across his face. Leia Organa. Revan's voice reached her. It is good you have returned. The pseudo-GD turned slowly to face the most feared woman in the galaxy. You are home again. A rush of motherly love washed over Leia, combined with fatherly affection and a twin's insight. Leia gasped and fainted. Began with the freaking fainting. Sato exclaimed, thumping his head into the palm of his hand. Just once you think that finding out where your parents wouldn't be, like, a big catastrophic event and you'd be, I don't know, happy, but neutral. Everyone's gotta go and faint on us and make us all worried and stuff. Are you done? His lover asked him when he stopped for air. I think so, yeah, he told her, grinning broadly. I'm going to take Leia to her room, Bane announced suddenly, tearing his gaze away from the face of his sister and meeting Revan's eyes. After a long moment, the woman nodded once, turning away to face the outside. Bane slid one arm under his sister's knees and the other just above her shoulder blades, carrying her bridal style out over to the door. He paused for a moment, trying to figure out how to get out of the room without setting the body in his arms down, before shrugging and commanding the durasteel walls of the forge to crumple to the side so he could walk through, closing them behind him. Apparently, turning sideways was more of a bother for him. Just down the hall, Leah's room awaited its occupant, as luxuriously decorated as Bane's was. He set his sister's form down on the soft sheets, before drawing up a chair and sitting, staring at her contemplatively. She knew, now. Knew that he was her brother, knew that Revan and Sato were the beings who had given her life, knew of her heritage and her destiny. Now it was only a matter of her accepting it. Bane blinked, calling the dark side to his eyes. Perhaps with more training he would be able to see auras without this intense focus, but for now even the briefest of glimpses gave him a headache. A brief glimpse was all he needed, though, to see the darkness winding its way around his sister's stretched-out body. He supposed he could see the family resemblance. Leah had their mother's build, slight and wispy, where he had their father's, but still that jawline, that stubbornness, those eyes, that was entirely Sato. Entirely Anakin. He relaxed his breathing, slipping his bare feet out of the soft boots, and folding them beneath him on the chair. His spine straightened as he fell deeper and deeper into his meditations, a comforting and entirely unnerving presence for the sleeping Leah. Come out. Revan called softly into the room. Come out of there. Han Solo complied, emerging blinking into the bright lights of the hallway. Are you ready to follow orders, my slave? She crooned. Han nodded jerkily, and bowed to the Empress. I do as you command, mistress. The pilot replied. Good. When Leah is finished her basic training, the three of you will head to the rebel hideout on Endor. From there, we will finish the rebellion off forever, and our rule will be ironclad for all eternity. The Sith lady sneered. Han nodded, and retreated back into the dark room at Revan's command. No? How many times do I have to show you this, Sideshaw? You bring the saber up behind your head, so the blade is horizontal, tip pointing slightly upwards. The handle should be in line with your shoulder at about the height of your ear. Then swing the saber horizontally, aiming for your opponent's neck. To increase strength you can hold the saber with 2 hands, or use 1 hand for increased speed. Got it. Sato growled. Leah nodded slowly. The red saber in her hand danced in the light of the bridge where she faced off against her father. My father, Leah thought. I still can't believe Darth Sato and Darth Revan are my parents. I've been fighting against my parents for years and I still should. They are not what is best for the galaxy. I will see them fall. Leah thought determinedly. But I will learn as much as I can from them. Very good, Leah. Sato complimented after Leah correctly completed the move. Now let us attempt a side talk. Revan watched from the door, smiling a little. Their family was whole again. But something was off about Leah. Her aura showed she was dark, yes. But her thoughts were difficult to read. This is my daughter. I should not be thinking of treason from her, but I cannot help it. Something about her hints of deception. Revan sighed. No, no, no. Sato roared. You do not aim for the head, you are trying to cut them in half. Revan intervened. Leah, I believe you are ready. You and Solo will head to Endor, and destroy the rebellion from within. And then, the Skywalkers shall lead the galaxy into its greatest glory for all of eternity. Revan and Sato had always considered Revan a Skywalker, even though they had never married. Leah nodded gracefully. Yes, mother. Fools. She will betray us, mother. Bane's statement was rewarded with a simple widening of Revan's eyes, a slight inhalation, and a tensing of her muscles. You have foreseen this. Bane shook his head slowly, considering his next words and how to explain it. There was no way without sounding pompous, he decided. I have felt it. And your powers of perception are greater than mine already, isn't it? Revan asked dryly, amusement obvious in her voice. Bane grinned. Never, dearest mother. He sobered for a moment. I think it's because we're twins, 2 halves of the same whole. I can feel her emotions, like they're just under my own, always there. I can even read her thoughts, if I concentrate hard enough, and they say one thing only. If we turn her loose now, we will lose her. Revan sat back in her chair, tenting her fingers. Do you have a suggestion, my son? Bane paused. I may. Give me a week. For what? He told her. She laughed, and agreed. Leah was awoken by Luke Bane entering her room, carrying a package of black robes and whistling a cheery tune happily. Her eyes in shine, sleepyhead. We're going on a field trip. I have a mission, she reminded her twin. Her twin. Her skin crawled when she thought of this dark, sadistic, quirky boy as her other half. It's been postponed for a little while, he informed her brightly. Now go get washed up, and put these on. Every cell in Leah's body was screaming defiance as she silently took the robes and headed into the refresher. Once the water was streaming down her back, she took great pleasure in punching at the walls, until her frustrations were worked out, emerging from the room in her new outfit to find her twin sitting on the bed, meditating. He did that so often, she mused, it was a wonder his body didn't get stuck in that position. Good. Come on, our shuttle is waiting. Where are we going? Leah asked, almost having to sprint to keep up with her brother's longer legs. You'll see when we get there, now hurry. You'll regret this, she informed him. You're giving me a chance to run. I know, was his answer, and she froze for a moment. Was he responding to her vocal comment or her thought one? Silently, warily, she followed to the docking bay, to a small shuttle perched on the edge. Captain Adrado, Bane greeted the man standing by the shuttle. Are we ready for takeoff? We are indeed, my lord, he affirmed. Come on, Leah. It'll take us about 6 hours to get there, Leah told her, striding up the shuttle's ramp with calm cockiness. Leah trailed behind him, trying desperately to figure a way out of this, but coming up empty. Corbin? Leah asked incredulously. You brought me to Corbin. Bane turned to fix her with a wide-eyed, innocent stare that she didn't buy for a second. Yep. This way. And with that, he plunged into the darkness of the cave, grabbing her hand to drag her behind him. Several twisty-turny tunnels, a half-dozen slain beasts, and a narrow crumbling bridge over a gaping chasm later, the duo stood in front of an elaborate tomb entrance, about half of which was covered by rubble. Bane lifted his comlink to his mouth. Captain, we're about to go out of range. You have clearance for takeoff. Affirmative, sir. See you in 5 days. 5 days. Leah squeaked. Bane simply looked at her, stalking towards the entrance with cold grace. Leah paused. Should she try to make a break for it, and hope she could get away before Bane noticed? She had her training, and her lightsaber, but the only way off this stupid rock had just flown off and wouldn't return for 5 days, which meant that she would have to be hunted by her brother for just under a week, kill the people on board the shuttle, and fly it away before Bane could come to their rescue. Leah trailed the older boy's form through the darkness, barely noticing the dust kicked up by their feet, changing to a heavy mist until kill, destroy, ravage, raise, anger, hate, power. Leah gasped, falling to her knees and bracing herself against the floor, as her lunch threatened to make a second appearance. She tried to fight back against the darkness pouring itself into her head, tried to convince herself that she was good, she was light, but the smothering mist crept into her nostrils and flowed down her throat, until she was breathing it in as she heaved for air. Through tear-clouded eyes she could barely make out Bane's shadowed form, his eyes wide in ecstasy, as he let the power flow through him, looking at her impassively when his communion with the dark side was finished. She tried desperately to crawl away from the mist that somehow was the darkness, but it followed her, tingling with lightning and power, until she submitted to it, and let it do what it would. Seconds, minutes, hours later, the darkness released her, leaving her mind slowly with the tantalizing promise to return. Her entire body felt sullied, dirtied, both inside and out. Well, that answers that question, Bane remarked. There was a note in his voice, one she'd heard only few times before, most of them out of her own throat betrayal. I mean, I knew it, he continued, grabbing her bicep in a vice-like grip and hauling her to her feet, but it's different to have it confirmed. What? She asked, hating how weak her voice sounded, how hollow and tinny. The darkness wouldn't have attacked you if you belonged to it, Leah, he explained patiently, and the floor dropped out from beneath her. He knew. Let's go. He dragged her into the tomb, and she was far too stunned to do much about it. They paused in the large chamber just inside the door where he moved almost 3 tons of rubble to block the doorway effortlessly. Something about this place enhanced his powers while sapping her own, Leah knew suddenly, and felt that sinking feeling again. If he wanted to kill her here, he could, without much effort, and they'd only been here for a few minutes. She had to spend 5 days in this pit of dark energy. How was she going to survive? Sit, he told her with a chilly note in his voice, gesturing to one of the fallen pillars in the large room. When she, seeing no harm in it, complied, he lifted another piece of rubble with ease and set it down in front of her, sitting on it with a certain polished elegance. We, he told her, are going to have a talk.